Chapter 121, The Sage Halin. At the foot of the Visenya Hills. Outside the Alchemist's Guild Hall, hidden deep underground, Guildmaster Halin stood before the steps, craning his neck in the direction of Quiet Street, anticipating their arrival. Beside him were the sages of the guild, including Monsate and Meliad. Only 6 sages. Excluding assistants and apprentices, only these few were qualified to be full members of the guild, that is, sages. Only 6. Once, that number had been in the hundreds. Halin, the leader of the guild, was heartbroken by this. Not a day went by that he didn't think about restoring the guild to its former glory, continuing the efforts of his father, grandfather, and other predecessors, and successfully reproducing the secret arts on the scrolls. According to the records of past sages, the guild possessed many miraculous and mysterious techniques, such as refining metals and creating fire creatures. This was also why the sages were called alchemists or pyromancers. But from some point on, the power of spells and techniques began to inexplicably diminish and weaken, unable to be suppressed. To this day, the only thing that Halin and the other sages could still create was wildfire. Other magics and secret arts were merely words in ancient books, difficult to utilize. The guild had lost its most important power. At the same time, more and more maesters were sent by the citadel, and their influence on the lords they served grew. The same was true at the king's side. The guild had to compete with the maesters for the king's favor by using wildfire. After the extinction of dragons, the Targaryen kings were quite enthusiastic about wildfire, and the guild prospered for many years because of it. Unfortunately, the guild suffered heavy losses during the fall of King's Landing more than a decade ago. All the sages were killed. The guild was left with only bewildered assistants and apprentices, with no one to preside over the situation. In the midst of chaos and confusion, many people left the guild to seek other paths, and very few persevered to the end. Halin, who came from a family of alchemists, did not give up. Although he was only an assistant, he was already one of the most senior members of the guild at that time, and he subsequently successfully advanced to become a sage and began to lead the guild. Halin was initially full of confidence, intending to regain the king's favor with wildfire. But the subsequent King Robert only loved tournaments and feasts. Not only did the guild not recover and grow, but it also declined to its current state. More than a decade passed, and Halin almost thought that the guild, which had been passed down for thousands of years, would perish in his hands. Fortunately, there was now a turning point. Halin looked at Quiet Street in front of him with excitement and anticipation. King Joffrey would personally come to inspect. What a great honor, what a rare opportunity. The gods favored King Joffrey. As long as he gained the favor of this, the guild would surely prosper again, and even gain unprecedented power. Halin amplified his divine grace light curtain, and the edict above immediately appeared in the center of his vision. This creation of the light curtain alone was comparable to any miracle, enough to rival any legendary magic, profound and pure. Wasn't this precisely the knowledge and truth that the guild had been painstakingly pursuing? What's more, there was the other infinitely mysterious power of divine grace. Halin made up his mind that for such a bright future, he would not hesitate to present all the secrets of the guild to the king. His Majesty has arrived. The sound appeared before the person. Halin and the others knelt to pay their respects. The sound of hooves echoed as 2 rows of white-armored knights occupied the street on the left and right. The tall white stag then strolled over from the center, shaking its white antlers and stopping in front of Halin, snorting a few times, but spitting out 2 tongues of flame. Halin felt as if his hair had been ignited, but fortunately, it was just an illusion. The entire Alchemists Guild welcomes your Majesty. Your presence is our supreme honor. Halin respectfully lowered his head, and a pair of boots on the back of the white stag stepped onto the ground. The dark patterns on the pants were clearly visible, and a beautiful hand raised a finger. Halin slowly stood up. Joffrey patted Halin's shoulder amiably. Have you prepared 10,000 jars of wildfire? Halin bowed. Thanks to your Majesty's care, the gods have bestowed more good fortune, allowing us to discover many lost wildfires in the Dragon Pit, the Great September of Baelor, and various underground passages. Combined with the previous storage, we have finally lived up to your Majesty's trust. In fact, it was more than that. Not long after the king's coronation, he had successively sent many gemstones and dragon crystals containing the power of divine grace to the guild. According to the king's instructions, these crystals were placed near the instruments for making wildfire. The result was shocking. Halin excitedly and hesitantly discovered that the power of divine grace could make the spells for making wildfire more effective, and the production of wildfire greatly increased. The power of divine grace. Hallen silently chewed on this term. Joffrey had long been aware of the effect of source energy. This also proved that wildfire was indeed closely related to magic, not just some flammable ordinary substance. Joffrey was very satisfied with this answer. The Magic Empire was to fully develop magic, using its unique advantages to ensure its monopoly. The technology used must not only be advanced and powerful, but also ensure that it is difficult for others to copy, so as not to allow other forces to develop and grow, increasing the difficulty of conquest. After all, this was a world of who was less bad. It was not necessary to do everything to the best, as long as it was less bad than others. After resolving the crisis and obtaining the entire world, it would not be too late to use various technologies and knowledge to fully build the empire. Your Majesty, the Hall of the Alchemists Guild is below here. Hallen gestured to the road with his side. Joffrey stepped onto the steps, with the King's Guard Beauty Brienne and the bold Baristan closely following behind. Tyrion strode with short legs to keep up, while using magic to secretly communicate with Joffrey. Your Majesty, did Daenerys indeed move into the bedchamber last night? I wonder what position you plan to give her. Tyrion was very worried. The former Prince Joffrey was foolish and willful, but the current King Joffrey was a little smarter, but also more willful, and his material desires and enjoyment were almost comparable to Robert. Even for the sake of Daenerys' bloodline and identity, there was no need to be so impatient, almost humiliating the betrothal. Could it be that the king was just blinded by her beauty? Joffrey stepped forward unhurriedly. Above the steps was a wide platform, entering a heavy black door, and in front of him was a dark tunnel curving downwards. The further down he went, the more humid and colder the air became. Hallen carried a sealed glass oil lamp to lead the way in front. The light of the lamp was weak. Joffrey directly activated a gemstone embedded in his chest, and a cold white light suddenly filled the entire space, exposing every black stone in the tunnel. Joffrey finally responded to Tyrion, Daenerys' position? I am very fair. Whoever contributes more, whoever is more loyal, deserves a better position. Tyrion immediately understood the meaning. It turned out that Joffrey was expressing his dissatisfaction with Stark. Chapter 122. Son of Fire. The group continued downwards. Wise man Hallen was introducing the capabilities of the Alchemists Guild and the advantages of wildfire to the king. Joffrey smiled and nodded, while using magical sound transmission. Tyrion, is the strength of King's Landing enough to wipe out the rebels? How could Tyrion say no? Now the lords of the north have gathered more than 20,000 troops, heading north, not south. Joffrey was indeed quite unhappy. Although he had personally agreed to the north heading north, the attitudes of these lords before and after were too different. They only scraped together a few thousand people to deal with him, but they did their best to help Stark, which was simply a blatant slap in the face. And Duke Eddard Stark not only acquiesced to the isolation of the north, but also did not get enough support from the Riverlands and the Vale. With Eddard's status and reputation, he should have had more influence over the Riverlands and the Vale. But until now, the Vale has basically remained completely neutral, and the lords of the Riverlands have not fully responded to the call. Only the supply of materials has not been delayed, but they have not charged a penny less. In order to support more than 20,000 soldiers, in order to fill the stomachs of hundreds of thousands of people in the city, not only the national treasury, but the entire wealth of King's Landing is rapidly losing. With such a level of support, who would have thought that the royal family and the Starks were close allies by marriage? Joffrey knew the most fundamental reason. The rumors of Renly and Lisa ultimately made Duke Eddard suspicious. Coupled with his disgust for the Lannister family and his disdain for political tactics, Eddard still chose to escape. If it weren't for Sansa and Jon and others staying in King's Landing, and the existence of divine grace, perhaps Eddard's performance would have been even more negative. Joffrey couldn't help but wonder if it would be more valuable to marry into Highgarden. At least the Tyrells are really willing to give troops. The marriage with the direwolf was supposed to bring peace to the Seven Kingdoms. However, the support from the north is almost the same as before. Only a dozen years ago, many lords in the Riverlands and the Vale chose to resist their liege lord for the Targaryen royal family, which was at greater risk and at a greater cost. Facts have already verified the thoughts of the lords of the Seven Kingdoms. Although the Baratheon family inherited the Iron Throne with a part of the Targaryen bloodline, the lords did not completely transfer their centuries of loyalty to the new royal family. The Seven Kingdoms are already at odds. Joffrey gave Tyrion the final answer: whoever contributes more is qualified to sit in a better position. Tyrion couldn't help but ponder. Could it be that Joffrey is planning to change the marriage contract? Is this wise? Tyrion was very worried, but he was not foolish enough to ask. Silence was the only option. The slope of the tunnel gradually leveled out. Your Majesty, the Iron Torch corridor is ahead. Haelin's voice had a mysterious flavor, the mystery of wildfire lies within. Tyrion peered forward through the gaps of several figures blocking the way, emerald light shining through the gaps. The group finally walked out of the tunnel. In front of them was a narrow and empty corridor. The walls and ceiling were made of black marble, but at this time it was shrouded in emerald green fire, exuding a strange luster. Tyrion looked up into the distance. On both sides of the long corridor stood pairs of black iron pillars, a full 2 feet high, and green flames were dancing around these iron pillars like torches. So this is the Iron Torch. Haelin explained triumphantly, using these iron torches, the guild can produce a considerable amount of wildfire every day. Now, this number, is a full 200 jars. 200 jars. Thinking of this number, Haelin still couldn't calm down. 200 jars, a monthly output of 6,000 jars, which is comparable to all the guild's reserves over the years, enough to support a huge battle. How many people will be infected with wildfire and die in agony? Tyrion shook his head and sighed, what a magnificent iron torch, but unfortunately, today's output will probably be greatly reduced. Just looking at the green light and green fire, Tyrion could imagine the amazing consumption of wildfire. Haelin looked at the king flatteringly, Your Majesty's presence, no matter how much it costs, cannot reflect the guild's excitement and gratitude. Joffrey was non-committal, what I want today is not wildfire, you are ready. Haelin nodded repeatedly, of course, how dare I rashly disturb your Majesty without making the most adequate preparations. The rituals and spells are all ready. In order to attract the king's attention, Haelin carefully searched through the ancient books of the guild for a whole week, and finally collected every piece of knowledge to perform the lost magic, just waiting for an experiment. Your Majesty, it's in the hall behind the corridor. Haelin diligently led the way, occasionally turning his head to tell the glorious history of the guild, guaranteeing that this time he would definitely satisfy His Majesty the King. Joffrey casually looked at the iron torches on both sides, with emerald green fire reflecting in his eyes. He was not unfamiliar with this corridor. Although this was his first time to the Alchemists' Guild, he had observed it many times with magic. He had also seen the secret of wildfire long ago. The main raw material for making wildfire is a viscous black liquid, like unprocessed oil. The pyromancers poured it into the hollow interior of the iron torch, and then mixed in a certain proportion of sulfur, rosin, and resin, and initially fused several raw materials at high temperature. At this time, the overall liquid was black-green, and then it was input into a secret room deeper through a pipe connected to the iron torch. The pyromancers chanted spells here, making strange gestures. Joffrey quickly noticed that the movements of the pyromancers had some similar rhythms to Melisandre's dance. After that, familiar patterns appeared in the air, patterns similar to the fire rune pattern, the same as Melisandre's at that time. Do alchemists and the Lord of Light have a connection? Or other powerful beings with the power of flame? He continued to observe. The runes in the air began to sprinkle colorful starlight, and the starlight merged into the large tank filled with oil in the center of the secret room, and the uppermost layer of the liquid gradually turned emerald green, which was wildfire. Colorful starlight. He immediately realized the key. What kind of magic is this? Isn't all magic pure monochrome? This is a major discovery. After that, he asked Melisandre to perform more spells. Most of these spells emitted monochrome light, and a few also had colorful light, and the effects of the spells seemed to be more complex. Can higher level runes create different magic, thereby achieving more refined and diverse effects? Joffrey's doubts increased instead of decreasing. If this is the case, why divide so many kinds of runes? Just use one kind of rune. Or is there indeed an almighty rune, but I haven't seen it? The answer is not certain. The wildfire in the iron torch was burning fiercely, and Joffrey looked forward. In any case, the direction of advancement of rune magic has been marked. Higher level runes, since they can be seen, must be obtained. What needs to be done now is to collect runes, accumulate background, and wait for that opportunity to come. Haelin, who was leading the way in front, stopped. The iron torch corridor had been left behind, and where the group was a circle of high platforms, and below was a wide hall. Joffrey looked down. Dozens of people were arranging the layout of the ceremony. Haelin prayed devoutly, "May the gods bless, may the son of fire be born smoothly. Joffrey was also looking forward to it. Chapter 123. A chilling white light shone down from above. All the assistants and apprentices looked up in awe. The king behind the pure white orb was so dazzling, yet his face was indistinct, as if he were an angel too holy for mortals to gaze upon. Heron and several sages, having descended into the hall, couldn't help but look around. In the light, the stone walls, columns, and figures were clearly visible, along with narrow tunnels connecting various places, intricate patterns carved into the panels, heavy ancient wooden and iron doors, and black stone platforms resembling altars. What a magnificent and beautiful hall, a glorious masterpiece of the guild's predecessors. Heron excitedly and proudly took in everything he saw. In all his decades, this was the first time he had seen the hall in such clarity. Although the hall was some distance from the wildfire storage, the heat of the flames shouldn't ignite the wildfire deep underground. But out of caution, coupled with long-standing habits and traditions, the guild had always used only sealed oil lamps for lighting, never braziers or torches. Even the iron torch corridor, which was closer to the surface, usually had no exposed flames, except during extremely important moments, such as welcoming the king. Heron looked up at King Joffrey, the bright white light blurring the king's face, as if staring directly at the sun. Fortunately, he was able to make out the king nodding. Receiving the instruction, Heron turned to look at the black stone altar in the center of the hall, where the sacrifices were already in place. Today, at this very moment, the guild would rise again, the alchemists would be revived, as long as the flame child was successfully born. Heron anxiously checked the arrangement of the scene. The outer walls of the altar were painted with the magic circle recorded in ancient texts, the ink made from a mixture of blood, sulfur, silver powder, and wildfire. 9 wooden crosses stood on the altar, the sacrifices locked to them, motionless. 3 sacrifices had been slaughtered early on, their blood gradually flowing into the carved patterns on the altar. 3 sacrifices were wearing nooses, waiting for the flames to rise, with assistants standing by to immediately strangle them, offering their souls and deaths to the ritual. The last 3 sacrifices were fast asleep, unharmed. The sacrifices surrounded a vat full of wildfire. Heron took out a scroll, scrutinizing the ancient incantation copied onto it word by word, ensuring no mistakes were made, lest all efforts be wasted. This incantation needed to be chanted 9 times, alternating between 3 languages 3 times. Heron and the sages had spent many days determining its specific meaning, and then spent a long time practicing the chanting until they were skilled enough to recite it without hesitation. Finally, he looked at the ground. The crystal stones bestowed by the king outlined a 2-long hexagram array on the ground, with the black stone altar where the sacrifices were located at the center of the hexagram. Heron himself and the other 5 sages stood at each corner. This hexagram array was not a requirement recorded in the ancient texts. But Heron's greatest confidence lay precisely in this extra magic circle, or rather, the crystal stones containing the power of divine grace. Records of ancient rituals were not uncommon, and Heron believed that his predecessors must have made many attempts, with predictable results. The list remained ineffective. The predecessors had many guesses about this. Dragons, magic, or even gods. Heron once didn't know which explanation to believe. But now, with just a few crystal stones, the creation of wildfire could be greatly accelerated, even without more incantations or magic circles. Heron seemed to know why those spells had failed. It wasn't dragons, but the power behind the crystal stones. The flame child, would it like the crystal stones? Heron took a deep breath, the damp, cold air filling his nostrils and chest, slightly calming his restless thoughts. Then, he looked at each of the other 5 sages one by one. Between the exchange of glances, the mysterious ritual lost for countless years quietly began. The 6 sages slowly unfolded the scrolls in their hands. The first recitation of the incantation was in the common tongue brought to Westeros by the Andals, which Heron and the others chanted aloud together. Great Master of blazing flames and life, you are. Your followers are here to pray, accept our sincerely offered sacrifices, respond to the call of the ritual. Spirits of leaping flame. The voices of the sages echoed continuously in the spacious hall, trembling, intense, and fanatical, as if calling upon a worshipped god. The second recitation was in High Valyrian, which sounded more fluent and beautiful, like a poem. The third recitation was in Asii, the words short and coherent, even more mysterious and profound, completely an obscure magical incantation. Joffrey stood on the high platform, watching quietly. The incantation sounded ordinary, just some phrases in several languages, seemingly very easy to copy. But Joffrey had already conducted a large number of experiments. The dances and incantations of Melisandre and the alchemists did not work on everyone. Even if people were to completely replicate them, with sufficient source energy placed around them, there was still no guarantee that they could use the corresponding spells. The source of the power of the spells, the high-level runes that suddenly appeared, behind this were probably multiple powerful beings, and they would also perform some kind of screening on those who sought power. How was this response mechanism achieved? What was their, or his, state? Did they have human-like thoughts, intelligence, or emotions? Joffrey only knew that they had not manifested in the world. As for the reasons or motives, it was still a mystery. Great Master of Blazing Flames and Life. The 6 sages in the magic circle chanted the second round. Master of Blazing Flames and Life. Joffrey pondered this title. Did this refer to the Lord of Light? Another being? Or was it just a meaningless exaggerated name, just to make the spell look more mysterious? Great Master of Blazing Flames and Life. The sages chanted the third round, and began to make strange postures, faster and faster, gradually dancing, like a ball of flame. Bang! The magic circle on the outer wall of the altar suddenly burst into flames, the deep green flames winding upwards, clinging to every black stone it touched, scorching the entire altar. The assistants who had been waiting for a long time immediately tightened the nooses, ending the lives of the 3 sacrifices. The souls of the 3 sacrifices slowly dissipated in the air. Joffrey looked at the top of the altar. 2 complex patterns were drawing source energy from the crystal stones, transforming it into dense starlight, which sprinkled down on the altar. The vat of wildfire on the altar quickly glowed green. The sages gradually retreated, the incantations and dances still continuing. The fire snakes on the outer wall of the altar climbed onto the platform, heading towards the vat of wildfire in the center. The sages stopped chanting and ran wildly outwards. Boom! The wildfire exploded and shattered, the emerald green flames instantly engulfing the entire altar. The wildfire devoured the 3 unconscious sacrifices, who awoke in agony, but all they could do was scream in despair, until their throats were destroyed and their bones turned to ash. Harren climbed up the high platform, panting heavily, and came to the king's side. Joffrey concentrated on observing the altar. The wildfire leaped and danced endlessly, the emerald green flames shooting up several high. All 9 sacrifices had been burned to ashes, leaving only 6 invisible souls. The silver starlight entangled the souls, dragging them towards the passionately dancing wildfire. Chapter 124. Chirp! A short sound rang out from the flames of the altar, sharp and piercing, as if torn by a gale. Everyone held their breath, awaiting the unknown change. Chirp! Chirp! The emerald flames calmed down on their own, like flowing water, curling inwards towards the center, no longer clinging to the scorched stones and ashes on the periphery. This was definitely not an action that any ordinary flame could accomplish. Halen widened his eyes. Elf, my elf, alchemist's elf, come out quickly. As if hearing people's summons. The green fire gradually dimmed and became transparent, losing its color, and then, golden flames were born from it. The golden flames pulsated irregularly, sometimes expanding into a pile of fire several feet high, with faint human faces composed of flames wailing, and sometimes shrinking into a palm-sized flame, almost extinguishing. Halen's heart beat or stopped with it. Fortunately, the golden flames finally calmed down, stabilized at a size of 1 jong, and the leaping tongues of fire gradually converged, eventually forming a distinct human shape. Child of Fire. Halen couldn't tell its gender, perhaps elves are neither male nor female. The hall was silent. Under everyone's gaze, it opened its eyes, the bright and dark flames distinguished the whites of the eyes and pupils, and even allowed people to see its emotions. Halen felt that the Child of Fire was in a good mood right now. Chirp! It shook its head, looking left and right, examining everything around it, seemingly very curious about the world it was in. Without a doubt, it was alive, it was a sentient being. Gasps and exclamations rose and fell. Halen's eyes were filled with tears, and his lips were trembling uncontrollably, and he was almost about to kneel down. Child of Fire! How many years has it been? The guild can finally create a truly undeniable miracle. Alchemists are not a lie. We can't just create wildfires. Alchemy and fire spirits are the true masterpieces of the wise. Halen couldn't wait any longer, the guild still had more spells and techniques, these must also be reproduced, alchemists will return to the most glorious era, and even surpass it. Halen looked at King Joffrey with fiery eyes, expecting the king's surprise and admiration. The little Tyrion took the lead in giving Halen a satisfactory reaction. What a shocking creation of miracles, to be able to exist in the body of fire, how terrifying, how wonderful. The alchemists truly live up to their name. Tyrion praised sincerely, while wondering why Joffrey was so calm and serious at this time. Isn't this what we came here for today? Why is Joffrey unhappy? Is he still thinking about the Stark matter? Joffrey was focusing on the hexagram array in the hall. The birth of the Child of Fire is indeed worth celebrating. A fire spirit with intelligence not only possesses considerable combat power, but also greatly deters enemies and boosts morale. But he had to notice that the source energy in the crystals that made up the hexagram array was still being consumed by the Child of Fire. It seems that the Child of Fire urgently needs a supply of source energy. Perhaps this is also the truth of the extinction of dragons. Magical creations rely on magic to maintain their existence, and once magic weakens, the creations perish. Source energy may be a necessity for the survival of the Child of Fire and dragons, like oxygen for humans. But the current situation is that the two runes before absorbed a large amount of source energy, and the remaining source energy in these crystals is less than 10 units. According to the current consumption rate. Joffrey looked at the ignorant Child of Fire and sent a message to it, "Little Gold, you are dying." Chirp. The golden flames on the Child of Fire suddenly flared up several feet, and its head kept looking around, searching for the thing that had just frightened it. "Look up, Little Gold. Do you know what is above?" "Little Gold? Above?" It patted its forehead, not knowing why. The new world always had a sense of familiarity. "Also, I am Little Gold?" Little Gold raised its head, and a beautiful little man above was smiling at it. Strange. What are beautiful and smiling? What are people? How do I know? Little Gold became more and more confused. Except for the knowledge of the inherited mark, I shouldn't know anything else. The inherited mark made it understand that it was the spirit of fire, born to absorb and control fire, to help the summoner, to protect other spirits, and to resist frost. The most important thing is to stay in a place with strong magic, otherwise it will die. It knows what death is. Death is the extinguishing of the flame, and there is nothing left. Little Gold satisfiedly felt the abundant magic around it. What a comfortable feeling. How could I die? Little Gold, do you like the crystals on the ground? Little Gold looked at the ground. Magic. There is magic in the shiny things, being absorbed by its inherited mark. Hey? Little Gold noticed something was wrong. What I should absorb is the magic coming from the unknown place, that is the source of magic. Little Gold calmed down and carefully sensed. The magic in the unknown place is not strong, even thin and barren, not enough at all. Little Gold was immediately terrified. The magic in the shiny things is getting less and less, and it will be gone soon. By then, I will die. The flames on Little Gold's body rioted with its emotions. It turned back into a burning fire, and the original human form was completely covered up. Little Gold, come to me. Little Gold raised its head, and the beautiful little man was waving to itself. That's right, he also hides a lot of magic. No, I won't die. Little Gold's eyes became brighter, and the golden fire shone straight at the beautiful little man. As long as I get those magic, my flames will continue to burn. The Child of Fire moved its legs and took the first step since its birth. The magic in the shiny things was completely exhausted. Little Gold immediately felt the inherited mark's thirst for magic in its body, as well as the omnipresent, indescribable pain and fear. It hurriedly ran towards the beautiful little man. But the mark couldn't wait at all. Without magic, the mark would devour its body without hesitation. Amidst everyone's exclamations, Little Gold leaped up with all its strength. The flames danced wildly, and floated straight towards the beautiful little man. When it came to the magic, the remaining body was almost the same size as the little man. Little Gold just wanted to breathe a sigh of relief, but the mark failed to absorb the magic of the beautiful human, and was still devouring itself. Little Gold, do you want crystals? The human stretched out a hand, holding a crystal in his fingertip, and another kind of inedible magic. Make a contract with me. It's too late. Little Gold nodded non-stop, trying to touch the life-saving crystal. The inedible magic entered its body. Little Gold understood what a contract was, something more hateful than the summoner. But it had no other choice. The contract was reached. Joffrey lifted the restriction of the restoration rune in the crystal, and the source energy flowed to the Child of Fire, stopping its collapse. The dazzling mutation finally subsided. Everyone gathered around. Tyrion looked at Little Gold and smiled self-deprecatingly, "Child of Fire, as tall as me." Little Gold, which had shrunk to 4 feet tall, only cared about holding the life-saving crystal, and did not pay attention to the eyes and words of humans. "Little Gold, do you want more crystals?" It raised its head. The beautiful human took out a large handful of crystals, which contained countless magic. Chapter 125, Ogre. On the steps outside the Alchemist's Guild, Joffrey tirelessly teased the fire spirit in his palm. The 1-inch-tall golden figure quietly hugged a crystal as large as itself, completely ignoring its ill-tempered master. After a portion of its body was devoured by the inheritance mark, the fire child Goldie's solidified form could only be 4 inches tall at most. Exceeding this size would cause its form to become increasingly loose and transparent, with the flames on its body becoming more uncontrollable. Goldie reluctantly accepted the 4-inch height. However, this master called Your Majesty made it shrink smaller and smaller, until it could be grasped in his palm, and it couldn't easily return to its original size. How could it tolerate this? Goldie took a sip of magic power from the crystal, so sweet, so reassuring, filling it completely. It could tolerate it. Suddenly, a strong force pushed up from below, and Goldie saw everything falling downwards rapidly. Then, the palm beneath it flipped over, tossing it onto a golden meadow. 2 fingers took the crystal from its arms, but fortunately, the magic power within continued to flow in from below. Goldie dazedly got to its feet. The edge of the golden grass was surrounded by a circle of shimmering walls, with many curved and intertwined golden branches forming beautiful patterns on the wall. Gold, crown. Goldie recalled 2 names. So this was the top of the master's head. Just as Goldie understood its location, the whole world suddenly spun around, throwing it far away, directly crashing into the hard crown. It quickly clung tightly to the branches on the crown. Joffrey turned his head to talk to Harren beside him. "The Alchemist's Guild has performed well this time. What reward do you want? Just name it." Harren bowed humbly, "It's all thanks to Your Majesty's divine grace that the Fire Child was successfully born. Moreover, being able to personally participate in such a miracle is already the highest honor. How could I ask for any reward?" Harren frequently glanced at the Fire Child perched on the king's crown, feeling both pride and disappointment in his heart. He clearly saw that in the birth of the Fire Child, the Guild's inherited spells and rituals were indeed useful, but the king's divine power seemed even more crucial. If there was no divine grace, could the Guild replicate this power again? Thinking of this, Harren really wanted to take the Fire Child off the king's head for detailed study, even to take it for himself. But Harren wasn't crazy. "Harren, what is the total price of 10,000 jars of wildfire?" Joffrey asked abruptly. The Alchemist's Guild was not directly subordinate to the throne. To obtain 10,000 jars of wildfire from the pyromancers, it was obviously necessary to spend money. Hearing the king's question, Harren instantly had many thoughts. The king should know the price. Did he think it was too expensive? Or did he want to increase the order? Or did he want to raise the price as a reward? Not daring to remain silent for too long, Harren quickly spoke, "To be honest, Your Majesty, the wildfire manufacturing process is extremely dangerous. Over the years, assistants and apprentices have unfortunately suffered accidents, and the Guild must do its best to compensate their families." Harren tried to defend the Guild. "There are also the purchase of materials, daily expenses, safety measures, and debts owed from the past for making wildfire, etc. All kinds of expenses add up, and it's not very cheap. In total, 10,000 gold dragons." Harren carefully glanced at the king's expression. This was the originally agreed upon price. 10,000 gold dragons. When he quoted this price, Harren had mustered a lot of courage. It should be known that 10,000 jars of wildfire were the Guild's largest order in recent years. The Guild's expenses for the next few years or even decades might depend on this business. Harren had to slightly raise the price from the original cost. After all, if they wanted to restore the Guild's glory, attract more people to join, and conduct more research, money was essential. Of course, 2,000 or 3,000 gold dragons would also be acceptable. However, at that time, the royal family did not bargain at all, and readily accepted the price of 10,000 gold dragons. Could it be that the king now regretted it? Thinking of the recent clearing operations in King's Landing, and the king's holy war army, Heron deeply bowed, trying his best to show his respect and submission. 1,000 gold dragons would also be fine. Joffrey glanced at him faintly. You know about the research department, right? Of course, Heron knew this name. The research department, which had only been established a month ago, had already won a great reputation in King's Landing. People knew that the research department was full of crazy scholars and terrifying freaks, constantly pondering novel ways to kill people, and doing some inexplicable things. Heron, on the other hand, felt that these were like-minded fellows. Weren't those foolish people also slandering the alchemist's hard work in this way? Heron also knew some more secret things. The head of the research department, the notorious ogre Qyburn, was responsible for researching divine power and the divine power light screen. Heron was extremely envious of this. He had already experienced Qyburn's research results. Before today, under the warning of the divine power light screen, Heron had prayed at the prayer stone twice. Each time after praying, Heron noticed the differences in the divine power light screen. Some texts disappeared, some patterns and operations changed, and the tasks became more refined and frequent. After the second prayer, the light screen even began to teach knowledge such as writing and history, and there was also a sea of books that stored countless knowledge. Heron was immersed in the sea of books for 2 days before discovering that there was more and more knowledge in it, and he couldn't finish reading it at all. The light screen also assigned him the task of accumulating streams into the sea. Heron tried to find a few ancient scrolls, and the light screen successfully included them in the sea of books, and rewarded some points. The points were not very practical, and could only be used to purchase honor levels, which looked good. But Heron had a hunch that the points would have more uses in the future. The reason was simple: the king wouldn't stop, and neither would Qyburn. Heron looked up at the king. What was Qyburn originally? Just a scholar expelled from the citadel. Just because of the king's favor. Just because of the king, Qyburn was actually able to paint on such a great creation as the divine power light screen, using his knowledge and wisdom to change the entire King's Landing, and would also change the 7 kingdoms, and even the world. This was the happiest home for a wise man. Research Department. The king's eyes were calm and deep, and Heron seemed to understand the king's intention. He knelt on one knee. Your Majesty, there is no need for any reward, please allow me to join the research department. Heron will definitely devote his heart and soul, offer eternal loyalty, and explore the power of divine grace and the mysteries of magic for your Majesty. Joffrey nodded slightly. The wise Heron certainly has this qualification. However, this is not enough to reward you for your merits. Joffrey gently helped Heron up. All members of the Alchemists Guild can join the research department and establish an alchemy branch. You are still their director, on the same level as Qyburn, how about that? Heron then knew that the 10,000 gold dragons were completely unattainable. Thank you for your Majesty's grace. Joffrey finally rode the white stag and returned to the Red Keep with satisfaction. Halfway there, the Minister of Security, Aaron, rarely sent Joffrey a message using the light screen. Archmaester Marwin of the Citadel has entered King's Landing. Joffrey sighed softly. Today was really busy. Summon him to see me. Chapter 126, The Magician. The evening sunlight had already dimmed. Inside the king's bedchamber in Magur's Holdfast, however, it was still as bright as midday. What brought about this scene was not the red glow of flames, but the clear, white light emanating from the dragon crystal orbs embedded in the ceiling. In a side hall, Dr. Marwin, the magician, who was waiting for the king to summon him, was staring up at the bright dragon crystal orbs on the ceiling. This was magic, or, as King Joffrey called it, divine grace. How did these dragon crystal orbs emit light? Why could the dragon crystal orbs at the Riverside Gate record information when entering the city? Was the king's transformation into a giant real or fake? Did Qyburn witness the light and flames with his own eyes? Marwin fell into deep thought. Servants brought tea to the 3 guests, and then, as if by agreement, began to observe the strangest visitor, Dr. Marwin, who was staring blankly upwards. This man was wearing a leather jacket, was short, stout, and sturdy, with a large head, thick neck, and broad chin. Rather than a maester who used his wisdom, he looked more like a thug who frequented the docks and taverns. Judging from his appearance, only the chain made of many metal links around his neck matched his identity. This was a maester's chain. Each metal represented knowledge in a certain field, representing that this person's attainments in this field had been recognized and proven by the Citadel. Marwin had also been awarded a Valyrian steel ring, scepter, and mask. This represented that the citadel acknowledged him as a master in the field of magic and arcana, and that he possessed the title of doctor, enabling him to sit on the conclave, manage the citadel, and elect the Grand Maester. Despite this, Dr. Marwin's days at the citadel were still not comfortable. Marwin knew the reason for this very well. The citadel had always loathed and even opposed witchcraft, prophecies, and magic, and was committed to building a world that pursued knowledge and had no mystical powers. Because of this, the other doctors were exceptionally repulsed by him, who was obsessed with magic and mystical knowledge. Dr. Virion, with his sour vinegar, even gave him the sarcastic nickname, Marwin the Magician. Marwin accepted this gladly. For him, who believed in and recognized the power of magic, the title of magician was not an insult, but rather a blessing and praise. Magic, this was precisely the purpose and motivation for his long journey. Qyburn's letter mentioned many things, the prophecies of the Asii, the Targaryens, King Joffrey's coronation, flames and light, divine grace, a screen of light that could transmit messages in an instant, and a research department. Ordinary people would treat this content as nonsense, but Marwin was willing to believe it. He understood Qyburn. Qyburn and himself were the same kind of person, able to face the truth and crave the truth. It was just that Qyburn was too obsessed, so that he was not accepted by the world, let alone those grey-robed sheep in the citadel. He believed that Qyburn would not joke about this kind of thing, and there were also some supporting words from King's Landing to corroborate it. Compared to the long, dangerous, but fruitless exploration journey of 8 years on the other side of the narrow sea, Qyburn and King Joffrey's invitation was undoubtedly well worth a try. This was an uncertain coin. Heads up, dreams come true. Tails up, spend some time, perhaps with unknown dangers. Marwin decided to toss this coin. The coin was far away in King's Landing. In order to get the coin, the primary difficulty was leaving the citadel and Old Town. The doctors of the citadel were all grey-robed sheep, only knowing how to poison, debate, and scheme. Marwin was not worried about the citadel's obstruction. But now it was wartime. Except for Lord Redwine, whose 2 sons were being held in King's Landing, all the lords of the Reach were loyal to King Renly, including the Hightower family of Old Town. The movements of a doctor were enough to attract the attention of families like the Hightowers. If he travelled north to King's Landing by land, he probably wouldn't even be able to leave the Rose Road before being intercepted, and there were countless unreasonable soldiers along the way. Marwin wisely chose the sea route. In the name of exploring the free city of Pentos, he took a ship south, bypassing Dorne, and then sailed north along the east coast to King's Landing, a reasonable plan. Unfortunately, there were only a few oared merchant ships in Old Town's harbour that would sail to King's Landing. The large number of oarsmen on oared ships made the ships more flexible, but also meant that they needed to dock frequently to replenish food and fresh water and other supplies. Dorne and the Stormlands along the way were not friendly to King Joffrey of King's Landing. Although the purpose of the trip had been concealed, the risk increased with each time the ship docked. To be on the safe side, Marwin brought 2 assistant acolytes with special identities and a passion for adventure and magic. Lariessa, who was half Dornish, handled the Dornish inspections. Leo Tyrell, who came from the Tyrell family, received good hospitality at various ports in the Stormlands. The journey went smoothly. What pleased Marwin even more was that the coin he tossed landed heads up. Qyburn did not lie, at least not completely lie. King's Landing was indeed full of mysterious power. Divine grace, magic, whatever you called it, in short, years of searching had finally yielded results. Marwin couldn't wait to immediately devote himself to the study of this power, to get a glimpse of the truth of the world. The sheep of the citadel still wanted to eliminate magic? Wishful thinking. The knowledge of the maesters might be able to interfere with the survival and reproduction of dragons, but it could not affect the world at all. The world had always been what it was, with magic, mystery, and mortals coexisting. After seeing the changes in King's Landing, Marwin was even more certain of his thoughts. Magic had returned? No, it had never gone away. Marwin's gaze finally moved away from the dragon crystal orb and looked straight into the depths of the bedchamber, as if seeing King Joffrey there. When exactly would he be summoned? He couldn't wait any longer, he just wanted to make an agreement with the king tonight, any conditions would do, as long as it didn't delay his exchange with Qyburn tomorrow. After a long time, a young girl finally walked into the side hall. His Majesty summons you, all 3 of you together. Marwin immediately stood up, took 2 steps, and then turned back to beckon to the 2 assistant acolytes. His Majesty summons you, come quickly. Lariessa jumped up nimbly. Leo Tyrell stretched lazily and slowly stood up. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The three people stood in the center of the hall and saluted together. The king sat on the throne at the deepest part, and the young girl who had led the way and another girl with silver hair and violet eyes were serving by his side. Marwin looked to the left. Qyburn with his grey-white hair was smiling at him. He had gotten old. Joffrey sized up the two teenagers to Marwin's left and right. The blonde boy on the left was wearing green and gold, and his appearance was somewhat similar to Loras. Assistant Acolyte Lazy Leo Tyrell. The boy on the right had black curly hair and light brown skin, was slender and delicate, with bright eyes, and wore green tights. Assistant Acolyte Sphinx Lariessa. Lariessa, half Dornish. Thinking of the theories and conjectures in the original book, Joffrey mobilized his mind and swept across. She really was a girl under those clothes. Interesting. Lariessa shuddered, as if she felt something. Chapter 127, A Secret Betrothal. Lariessa. Joffrey explored her dark eyes, as if peering into some secret within. "You are Sorella Sand." The king's voice, laden with intense spirit and magic, cut through the air, reaching everyone's ears. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned, their eyes dazed. The king nodded to himself. "It really is you, Sorella." No verbal response was needed. Joffrey had already confirmed the answer from her trembling eyes and the poisoned needle hidden between her fingers. An unexpected surprise. Sorella Sand, a bastard daughter of Prince Oberyn Nymeros Martell, the Red Viper, was known for her vivacious nature, intelligence, love for learning, passion for history, and pursuit of the unknown and secrets. Sorella and her 7 sisters all bore the Dornish bastard surname Sand and were collectively known as the Sand Snakes. Although these 8 Sand Snakes were nominally bastard daughters, Oberyn had given them the best protection and education, allowing them to grow up alongside the children of Sunspear and various Dornish lords. Thus, the Sand Snakes became a significant force among the new generation of Dorne. Joffrey liked this surprise very much. He had long been contemplating Dorne, wondering when and how to break the ice and incorporate its strength into his domain. Now, a Sand Snake had delivered herself to his doorstep. Sorella Sand. He scrutinized the tense and wary Sand Snake with a teasing gaze. Could it be that Prince Doran intends to heed the Iron Throne's call, marching north to confront the rebels, and has sent you ahead to deliver a message, demonstrating his sincerity? Theoretically, this was indeed possible. Oberyn's older brother was Doran Nymeros Martell, the Prince of Dorne, Lord of Sunspear, and Liege Lord to whom all Dornish vassals pledged allegiance. Based on this relationship, Sorella was Prince Doran's own niece, qualified to act as a messenger or a hostage. But in reality, Dorne would never willingly surrender now. On one hand, Dorne's unique geographical environment, with its vast desert wilderness, hindered its connection with the other 6 kingdoms. Its economy was relatively independent, making it difficult for foreign armies to conquer completely. Its culture and ethnicity, influenced by the Rhoynar, further weakened the Dornish people's sense of belonging to the Iron Throne. To this day, Dorne is the only one of the 7 kingdoms that still retains its royal title. The Martell family rulers and their children all enjoy the titles of prince or princess. Evidently, compared to other territories loyal to the Iron Throne, Dorne was more like a vassal state, or even a united kingdom. For this reason, Dorne had ample reason and confidence to remain neutral, without needing to hastily take sides. On the other hand, the Martell family stood by the Targaryen family during Robert's rebellion, choosing to oppose the Baratheon uprising. Prince Lewin Martell and countless Dornish soldiers died in that war. Later, the Lannisters cruelly murdered Rhaegar's wife, Elia Martell, and her children in King's Landing. Elia Martell was Prince Doran's only sister. Although Hand of the King Jonaran personally travelled to Dorne afterward to conduct peace negotiations, leading to the renewal of their alliance. Dorne had since forged an irreconcilable hatred with the Lannister family, while its support for the Iron Throne became even colder, and its isolationist sentiment grew stronger. Joffrey also knew that the Martell family had been secretly supporting the Targaryen restoration. Oberyn had personally travelled to Braavos, a free city, and, with the Sea Lord of Braavos as witness, entered into a secret agreement with Sir Willem Darry, Viserys Targaryen's protector. The two parties agreed that Viserys would marry Arianne Martell upon reaching adulthood, and Dorne would then launch an uprising to support Viserys in reclaiming the Iron Throne. Varys, Pentos Magister Illyrio Mopedus, the exiled John Connington, and the Golden Company's commander, Miles Toyne, were also involved in this conspiracy. But this plan had undoubtedly been completely shattered. Joffrey extended his left hand, and Daenerys obediently pressed her cheek against it, lowering herself to sit on his lap as his hand moved. Daenerys, you might not know this, but Sir Willem Darry once found Viserys a fiancée. Joffrey looked at Zarella. What a perfect fiancée, Princess Arianne Martell, the heir to Dorne. Arianne? Zarella's gaze instantly shifted from Daenerys back to the king, meeting his mysterious and enchanting eyes, causing her to tremble uncontrollably. Too bad Viserys won't be needing her, Joffrey said with regret. Alas, I truly worry about Princess Arianne's future. Who can she marry now? Willis Tyrell of Highgarden, or will she compete with Lady Margaery for Uncle Renly's affections? I recommend Uncle Renly. Who says a king can only have one queen? Oh, right, Uncle Renly isn't a king. Joffrey kindly stated, but I can specifically issue a decree, permitting Uncle Renly to marry 2 wives. I hope Princess Arianne will be satisfied. Zarella continued to remain silent. King Joffrey's words were too sharp and heavy, she completely didn't know how to respond. Everything tonight had exceeded her expectations. Everything had been going smoothly. As assistant scholar Larissa, she had followed Dr. Marwin and successfully arrived in King's Landing. Next, she would quietly investigate King's Landing's secrets, cleverly obtaining the knowledge and information she desired. No one would notice her, just like at the Citadel. What an interesting adventure! But, how could her identity be seen through so easily? Is this magic? Renly and the Tyrell family will fail? Did her father and the others really support the Targaryens? Is King Joffrey targeting Dorne? Excitement, panic, and other indescribable emotions surged into her heart. Zarella raised her head and met the king's gaze, striving not to avert her eyes, showing her resilience. But she had nowhere to escape. Joffrey then looked towards the golden-haired youth. Leo Tyrell, has Highgarden sent you to sue for peace? Lazy Leo bowed respectfully. Your Majesty, although I am merely an assistant scholar, I have long dedicated everything to knowledge and truth, forgetting my surname. All matters concerning the Tyrell family are now past and have nothing to do with me. Joffrey picked up a 6-pointed star badge. Actually, I had already made up my mind. In order to restore peace as soon as possible, unite the vassals of the 7 kingdoms, and save the people from the flames of war, I am willing to endure criticism, break with tradition, and marry Lady Margaery as my second queen. Leo Tyrell looked at the king with a shocked expression. Joffrey sighed, it's just that the misunderstandings between the two sides are quite deep, and letters are not enough to convey sincerity. You are a suitable messenger. What a pity. Now it seems that we can only quell the rebellion with blood and fire. Joffrey tossed down the 6-pointed star. The brass badge kept spinning on the table, making crisp collision sounds, becoming louder and louder, more and more urgent. Before the 6-pointed star completely stopped, Leo Tyrell of the Tyrell family bowed solemnly. If it can stop the turmoil and save lives, one's own self-interest is not worth mentioning. What is it to be Leo Tyrell once more? Your Majesty, Leo is willing to serve as a messenger. Chapter 128. Joffrey finally turned his attention to the magician Maester Marwin, who was waiting silently. The stocky man grinned at him, revealing a mouthful of teeth stained with mottled red, as if he often chewed tobacco leaves or something similar, unable to control himself and not cleaning them in time. Joffrey returned a faint smile. Marwin had more than one fracture mark on the bridge of his nose, his hands were rough and large, and he was dressed quite casually. At first glance, he was simply a sloppy and irritable brute, who only knew how to fight, cause trouble, and freeload. But he was indeed a maester. Moreover, the number of links on the maester's chain around his neck was almost as many as Archmaester Pycelle's. You must know that the Archmaester, as the advisor selected by the Citadel's conclave for the king, had a chain made of all kinds of links. Joffrey looked at Marwin's left hand. The maester's thick finger wore a ring made of Valyrian steel, which emitted a faint white light, and the pattern inside belonged to a recovery rune. Maester Marwin. Joffrey asked softly, is Valyrian steel indestructible? Marwin shook his head firmly, nothing is absolutely indestructible, and Valyrian steel is no exception. Otherwise, how could the Kohoric blacksmiths reforge it? Otherwise, how would I have this ring? Marwin raised his left hand, showing the black steel ring. Marwin knew more than that. But now, there were only 2 girls serving by the king's side, and the elderly Qyburn. The 2 assistant maesters he brought had been exposed by the king one after another, and they were also involved in the overall situation of the 7 kingdoms. The atmosphere was quite delicate. Marwin had gradually calmed down from his fanaticism for magic. This was a private summons, a test of each other, and an important negotiation. At least, that's how Marwin felt. Marwin was very curious, how much did King Joffrey know about magic? Joffrey asked again, besides blood sacrifice and flames, what else can destroy Valyrian steel? Maester Marwin wouldn't have never tried it, would he? Marwin then knew that King Joffrey should have already gotten the answer. Your Majesty, frequent and violent collisions with swords or blunt instruments can also reduce the effectiveness of Valyrian steel, and then it can be destroyed, just like fighting against good steel. Marwin looked at the king's eyes, calm and unwavering. If it is only to destroy the shape rather than divide it, Valyrian steel will gradually recover on its own. If it is divided into several pieces, it will not grow back to its original shape, but will be separated and stabilized into these smaller pieces of Valyrian steel, which are still effective, and can still maintain the characteristics of hardness and self-recovery. But if the number of divisions is too large, it will produce degenerate fragments that cannot restore their shape, and are not as hard and sharp as they once were. The upper limit of the effective number of divisions is difficult to determine, and almost every piece of Valyrian steel is different. In Marwin's vision, Daenerys Targaryen, the girl called the Master of Whisperers, and Qyburn were all indifferent, as if they were just listening to a boring old story. So, Marwin gave the conclusion, Valyrian steel should have multiple magic runes. These invisible and colorless, indestructible runes are probably the source of the magical effect of Valyrian steel, which can be separated with the division of the carrier, but there is a certain number limit. Sorella Sand and Leo Tyrell were gradually fascinated. Maester Marwin had never explained the mysteries of Valyrian steel in such detail before, always saying half and leaving the other half, whetting people's appetites. However, no matter how much my mortal eyes peep at the sun, I dare not stare at its light for too long, let alone see its true face. There must be countless omissions and errors in it. Marwin bowed slightly. Please, Your Majesty, correct me. Everyone refocused their attention on the king. Joffrey yawned softly, then took out a golden toy figure from his arms and threw it into the air. The toy figure fell downwards in circles, but its hands, feet and body gradually twisted. Swoosh! It landed steadily on the wooden table, its feet firmly planted, and its body upright, almost silently. Chirp! It took small steps towards the king's right hand on the table, and its pair of rice grain-sized fists kept hammering the back of the king's hand, seemingly expressing dissatisfaction, but more like acting spoiled. Sorella and others exclaimed one after another, and then immediately silenced. Qyburn rushed over before Marwin, his whole body almost lying on the table. This is the Child of Fire. It's alive. Marwin stared at the little man's every move obsessively, as if looking at his most beloved woman. Child of Fire. Marwin savored this strange and mysterious name. Yes, its body is golden flame, born from the flame, a creature of wisdom. Shouldn't it be called the Child of Fire? This is the first piece of Valyrian steel born from my hands. The king's voice suddenly sounded. Marwin looked at the king's left hand, which was a dagger as black as night. Light of Peace, that is its name. I once had high hopes for Valyrian steel. The king rotated the dagger in his hand, and a cold light flickered. The gods have given me the all-knowing eye, so that I can monitor the world, examine souls, and clearly see the truth. I have thus learned countless mysteries. The king laid the dagger flat and sent the Child of Fire onto the blade. Valyrian steel contains magic runes, and the magic power it breeds has the miraculous effect of healing and restoration, which created Valyrian steel, and also graced the priests in the Holy War Army. It will spread throughout the world. With it, the wounded will be reborn, swords will be indestructible, and castles will last forever. This power is enough to honor the 7 kingdoms, right? Imagining those scenes, the soldiers standing up again and again, the self-repairing magic sword, the indestructible fortress, Marwin could only nod deeply. But there is more than one truth in the world, and more than one kind of rune. The king tilted the dagger, and the little Child of Fire fell to the ground, and then the flames surged, expanding and increasing until it became as tall as Marwin. The flames were tantalizing, and Sorella and Leo couldn't help but step back. Fire, soul, light, information, compared to Valyrian steel, there are all kinds of more powerful and magical magic. Just research and apply them one by one, and the day of building the kingdom of heaven on earth is not far away. Maester Marwin, Joffrey put down the dagger, that is why I summoned you. What do you think? Facing the scorching golden flames of the Child of Fire, countless thoughts flashed quickly in Marwin's heart. King Joffrey's behavior was really surprising, as if he hadn't answered any questions, but as if he had said everything. Runes, magic, and all kinds of magical creations he had seen with his own eyes. Marwin couldn't find any flaws. It seemed that the king's discovery was closer to the truth, and could even allow others to glimpse more of the truth. So, what are you still hesitating about? That's enough. Marwin offered his Valyrian steel ring to the king and bowed respectfully. At your majesty's disposal. Chapter 129. Marwin, from this moment on, you are no longer a maester of the citadel. Joffrey picked up Marwin's ring, clenched it in his palm, and when he opened it again, a stream of fiery red molten steel slid down his fingers onto the table. The wooden table, imbued with solid magical energy, remained unscathed. A King's Landing Academy will rise from the ground. You and scholars like Qyburn will all serve within it, with ranks of doctor, master, bachelor, and student, in that order. The molten steel on the table flowed irregularly, about to touch the edge of the tabletop. Joffrey stretched out his right hand and waved it in the air, and the molten steel gathered itself into a ball, then solidified into a badge with a six-pointed star as the base and a circular surface inlaid. Joffrey handed over the badge. You will like the academy, Dr. Marwin. Marwin silently accepted the new badge. The badge still had the color of night, with a pair of soaring wings on it, and an eye in the center connecting them. Flying eyes? I specially bestow the omniscient eye as the symbol of the academy, hoping that you will tirelessly explore the truth, make good use of any eyes, and see the reality of the world. Marwin noticed two lines of curved small characters on the edge of the badge. Omniscience is omnipotence. What is seen is what there is. Directly below the eye was his own name, Dr. Marwin. The ring turned into a badge, the academy replaced the citadel. What a charming magical power, what a capricious and proud king. It's getting more and more interesting. Marwin meticulously pinned the badge on his chest. Yes, Your Majesty. Dr. Marwin completed the transformation of his identity. Joffrey took out a similar black badge from his arms. Qyburn, don't be dazed, you certainly have a share too, come here. When handing the badge to Qyburn, Joffrey casually instructed, the research department will be renamed the Research Institute and incorporated into the academy. In the future, personnel will mainly be selected from the academy to supplement it as researchers. Of course, for now, continue to recruit talents regardless of their background. Qyburn respectfully accepted the order. Joffrey looked at Marwin and the other two. Qyburn, start the implantation. Dr. Marwin has come from afar, how can we bear to make him wait for divine grace? And the other two, use the high-level core for both of them. Qyburn took out a sharp blade and 3 chips. Marwin had anticipated this scene. Not only was he not flustered, but he also showed anticipation and excitement. Sorella Sand and Leo Tyrell were completely clueless. Seeing the grey-haired old man approaching with a steel knife, they were inevitably nervous and uneasy, and they had no liking for the old man's smile. Sorella even prepared to shoot the poison needle secretly hidden in her hand. Fortunately, Qyburn's blade first cut open the back of Dr. Marwin's neck. Sorella and Leo stared closely at Dr. Marwin's wound, watching Qyburn's every move. The grey-haired old man slowly pinched a chip and steadily and carefully inserted it into Dr. Marwin's wound. Even the tenacious doctor couldn't help but twitch his face, which showed that it was indeed quite painful. Leo slightly shifted his gaze. Sorella's eyes remained firm. She was not afraid of pain, but the question was how much damage would the chip cause and how much interference would it bring? The chip completely disappeared into the neck. The grey-haired old man reached out and pressed on the wound. After a few breaths, he moved it away, and Dr. Marwin's wound had disappeared. Sorella was even more shocked and uneasy. This should be the power of the magic runes that King Joffrey said, and it can indeed be shared with others. Sorella immediately thought of future wars. Dorne once resisted Aegon the Conqueror's dragons, but could it resist King Joffrey's terrifying army in the future? What price would they pay? She dared not delve into the answer to the question. What's more, all she could do now was watch quietly, and she was only allowed to do so. The steel knife and the chip then came behind Leo. Leo took a deep breath, trying to stop his body from trembling, his eyes staring straight at King Joffrey in front of him, seemingly seeking courage from the king. Joffrey observed Marwin. This doctor, who didn't look like a scholar, had adapted to his current state, shaking his head and marveling, muttering something from time to time. This was not surprising. When the divine grace light curtain, which only the person himself could see, was first implanted, almost everyone would become this funny and laughable. After all, the divine grace light curtain could be said to bring a second world to the host, a world of information. It was normal for the reaction to be intense. Your Majesty, may I ask presumptuously, what is your opinion of the citadel? Joffrey was slightly surprised. Marwin did not say these words, but sent them through the divine grace light curtain. The speed of learning is quite fast. Joffrey also asked through the light curtain, what do you think? Feel free to make any suggestions, and I will seriously consider them. Joffrey knew the importance and harm of the citadel. The citadel, which had cultivated maesters all over the Seven Kingdoms, maintained neutrality on the surface, never particularly favoring any lord or king, but focused on studying academics and serving the country. But this could not convince everyone. The citadel was not only located in Old Town, but also received long-term funding from the Hightower family of Old Town. The citadel is absolutely neutral? The Hightower family has no influence on the citadel? Heh. What he couldn't accept even more was that the citadel was not only suspected of promoting the extinction of dragons, but also stubbornly and foolishly resisted magic and mysterious forces. This was too much. In a world where magic exists, scholars who pursue knowledge actually reject the truth and are prejudiced against objective laws. They are definitely a reactionary force. Must be overthrown. The goal was very clear. But how to achieve this result, whether to crack it violently or to divide and win over, there was still room for discussion. Marwin, who had abandoned darkness and turned to the light, could play some role. Marwin sent a message. The conclave of the citadel has always hated magic and clung to the old ways. After your Majesty ordered Highgarden to submit and be loyal, the citadel will definitely not resist. But for the sake of the overall situation in the future, the old antiques of the citadel cannot be allowed to continue to hinder the development of the Seven Kingdoms. However, the citadel involves too many people, so it is best not to use force. People in the citadel who have not yet decayed can be absorbed into the academy, and facts can be used to shatter their prejudices, so that more brains and ideas can be used by us and explore the mysteries for your Majesty. In a few years, the backward and outdated citadel will disappear on its own. Marwin's words showed his attitude, abandoning the citadel, being loyal to the Iron Throne, and concentrating on building the King's Landing Academy. Joffrey was very satisfied. Good suggestion. I believe there are still some talents in the citadel. Suitable people can be selected into the academy and managed by you. The tasks of the academy will be very heavy, and the more talents the better. Marwin certainly wouldn't say no. Qyburn retracted the blood-stained steel knife. Your Majesty, the 3 divine graces have been bestowed. Joffrey glanced at the dazed Sorella and Leo, then ignored them and projected a map of King's Landing on the ground. The academy is for you to use. Qyburn, Marwin, and also call Haleen of the Alchemists Guild. The 3 of you doctors will design the academy drawings together. It must be practical and inspiring. A beam of light pinned the flea bottom. The entire flea bottom has been cleared, and the academy will be built here. Joffrey specially instructed, there is no need to consider technology, just imagine, just as if you are having a beautiful dream, any ground building can be successful. Can a beautiful dream also become a reality? Marwin felt the weight of the badge on his chest. Yes, with this kind of power, what is there to be afraid of? Chapter 130. You may leave. Joffrey leaned back against the wide back of the throne and closed his eyes. Maester Marwin, Maester Qyburn, a Sorella Sand with a complex expression, and Leo Tyrell quietly exited the royal chambers together. The royal chambers finally became quiet. Hannah gently sat to Joffrey's right, using her body's warmth to soothe the king after a busy day. To his left, Daenerys continued to listen silently to the king's heartbeat. After speaking so much just now and deciding so many things, the king's heartbeat had remained steady and strong, as if it couldn't be disturbed by anything external. Except when mentioning Margaery Tyrell and Arianne Martell. Viserys' betrothed. He probably doesn't even know, otherwise Viserys definitely wouldn't be able to resist saying something. Having spent over a decade together day and night, Daenerys believed she knew Viserys well enough, at least the Viserys he once was, before entering King's Landing. As for now, a servant, a pet, who hasn't changed. Viserys' betrothed. Why didn't Sir Willem Darry tell us about this agreement when he was seriously ill? Of course, Sir Darry also knew that Viserys couldn't stand waiting. So, what needed to be waited for? The Dornish marriage, the changes in Westeros, or the actions of certain people? Could it be as the king said? Have we always been at the mercy of ambitious schemers? Numerous figures instantly flashed through Daenerys's mind. Varys, the eunuch in the wooden box, Magister Illyrio, whose throat was pierced by the ruthless Arryn, the governors, princes, great lords, and business tycoons of various free cities. These people were all insidious and cunning, accustomed to scheming and stabbing people in the back. Without a doubt, if they were willing, it wouldn't be difficult at all to trap Viserys and herself in some conspiracy. Perhaps the wedding with Khal Drogo was also a scheme by these people. What kind of ending do they intend to give us? Thinking of that wedding with corpses strewn across the field, the bloody night in Pentos, Daenerys didn't know whether to rejoice or grieve. The stability of the Red Keep, versus the unknown of Essos, which life was more worth living? Daenerys closed her eyes, no longer dwelling on such annoying questions. Anyway, everything was in the past, and the future only held the Red Keep, not Essos. Besides, the Red Keep was very good. Divine grace made it more and more beautiful and exquisite, more and more magical and fantastical, like a land of fantasy. And also King's Landing. She heard that King's Landing had changed greatly, and this was only the beginning. Daenerys suddenly felt curious. Her impression of the city outside the Red Keep completely froze on the day of the king's coronation, crowded and bustling, tall towers and low houses, a strong smell of people and livestock, with people of all social classes prostrating themselves before the miracle. Compared to those free cities across the narrow sea, King's Landing was just an ordinary, even backward city. What would the king transform it into? Daenerys was still wondering how to get the king to take her out of the palace when she heard faint footsteps gradually approaching. "Your Majesty!" A short figure walked out from the doorway of the side hall, the imp Tyrion, a descendant of House Lannister. Daenerys knew she should hate him, but Tyrion was a good person. Unlike the cold and ruthless Tywin. Every time she saw Tywin's cold, rock-carved face, she could imagine the cruel way Tywin betrayed her father and ordered the attack on King's Landing. Tyrion silently stopped near the council table. Daenerys suddenly realized that Tyrion had been eavesdropping in the side hall just now. Why? What were the king's plans? Daenerys slightly raised her head, but from her angle, she could only see half of the king's profile and couldn't sense any emotion. Joffrey asked indifferently, "How are the holy warriors assigned to the engineering bureau performing?" "Your Majesty, they couldn't be more perfect." Tyrion was still amazed by the special powers these people displayed. Joffrey indeed possessed more than just those few types of magic. This latest one he bestowed could directly manipulate matter. Unlike the holy fire warriors who used flames, the holy grace priests who excelled at healing and recovery, and the holy shield warriors who were invulnerable to swords and spears. These holy creation artificers sent to the engineering bureau had other abilities. Tyrion had seen it with his own eyes. Without any other assistance, the artificers could instantly create a house from rocks and soil. Solid and exquisite, with no deviation from the blueprint design. What excellent craftsmen! They truly deserved the title Holy Creation. The only thing Tyrion regretted was that the artificers couldn't turn scrap iron into bright, shiny gold, otherwise his job as master of coin would be much easier. Nevertheless, the power displayed by the holy creation artificers was already satisfying. Tyrion bowed slightly. With the power of these artificers, the various tasks undertaken by the engineering bureau will be greatly accelerated. If possible, please send more holy creation artificers, Your Majesty, it will surely have miraculous effects. Joffrey chuckled, "All right, I'll consider it." Of course, he would only consider it. Based on the current situation, he already had a clear plan for the distribution of rune power. A fire rune image required 3 units of rune power and could create a holy fire warrior, currently numbering about 4,000. A recovery rune image also required 3 units of rune power, used to create holy grace priests, now numbering over 400. The solid rune image that created holy shield warriors required 4 units of rune power, and about 1,000 had been bestowed. The holy creation artificers used the shaping runes obtained from Dragonstone, which could shape the form of matter but couldn't change its properties. A shaping rune image required 4 units of rune power, and 200 had been bestowed so far. The ratio of the 4 types of runes was 20:2:5:1. According to the plan, only these 4 types of runes would be bestowed upon the holy warriors in the near future. Other runes either consumed too much rune power or had peculiar effects or were prone to losing control, and it wasn't time to popularize them yet. Overall, these 4 types of runes were the most cost-effective choice. In addition, the distribution ratio of the 4 types of runes would also remain unchanged. After all, rune power was still not abundant enough to be wasted at will. Various magics didn't need to be too numerous, just enough. Moreover, the construction of the eastern half of the city hadn't truly begun, so how many artificers were needed? Calculating the time, Renly and his Stormland cavalry were about to enter Bronze Gate. At that time, his army could advance west at any time, but the transformation of King's Landing was still delayed. Joffrey couldn't wait any longer. Use these artificers to build the King's Landing Academy and rebuild the eastern half of the city. Tyrion knew that the reason he had been asked to observe the meeting with Maester Marwin tonight was for the sake of the eastern half of the city. Tyrion, how many people are still stubborn and hindering the great cause of the Holy City? Tyrion reported the numbers: several dozen civilian houses and businesses, over 100 belonging to lords of the 7 kingdoms, and about 300 belonging to businesses from the free cities. Tyrion was already familiar with the situation. Few commoners dared to resist, some lords were unwilling to give up their private property, and the people from the free cities demanded too high a price and were the least obedient. Now is a time of war, let your city watch enforce it, and those who disobey will be treated as spies. Joffrey stood up, embracing the 2 maidens. It must be completed before sunset tomorrow. This is a war, only victory is allowed, no failure, no delay. Tyrion watched Joffrey enter the bedroom and close the door. War, et. Chapter 131. 2 Wars. War, ah. Looking at the chaotic scene on the screen in front of him, Hot Pie sighed silently. The people of King's Landing had not yet seen Renly's soldiers and swords, but they had already suffered from the torment of war, breathing the heavy atmosphere of war at all times. Hot Pie felt it even more deeply. In recent days, more and more people had fled into King's Landing from the south of the Kingswood. The vast majority of them had nothing, and could only sell their labor or bodies, gladly accepting any meager job, even being grateful for it. The people who had originally sympathized with them quickly changed their attitude. It was because the refugees lowered their prices and worked hard without complaint that the bosses who hired workers began to be picky, and their faces became more and more ugly when settling wages, and the price of hiring workers became lower day by day. Everyone's life gradually became more difficult and harder. Not to mention beggars and orphans. Hot Pie had even returned to the bakery where he used to work hard all day to visit. The familiar heat and the smell of bread. The table was full of white, yellow, and brown flour. Everyone's face and hands were covered with flour, and the cloth and leather worn on their bodies were not spared either. The flour had already penetrated every pore, and felt smooth and rough to the touch. Hot Pie subconsciously wiped his hands on his clothes, but his palms touched the familiar leather armor. A familiar baker's apprentice approached slowly, casting a hesitant look, his lips moving but not opening, as if he dared not confirm who he was seeing. Hot Pie knew that he had lost weight and changed. So he took the lead in giving a hug, jokingly cursing a few times, and the apprentices gathered around to talk. Good friends complained incessantly about the old baker's harshness, saying that the bread oven was working day and night, and the money earned could not be counted, but the old thing not only did not give everyone copper coins, but also cut back on food, only giving 2 black breads a day. Saying that everyone baked countless breads and pies, and also had to run errands to deliver meals, but they were always hungry all day long, barely filling their stomachs. Saying that since the refugees entered the city, the old thing had been meticulous about every handful of flour, let alone the baked bread. Anyone who wanted to hide half a loaf of bread would be beaten severely, or even kicked out of the bakery. Saying that there were fewer and fewer lemons, blueberries, and meat fillings in the bakery, and every kind of bread was getting more and more expensive, and the customers would scold them severely. Hot Pie listened attentively, occasionally echoing a few times, while calmly observing each person's face. While cursing, his friends cast eager and expectant eyes at him, and more apprentices with ordinary relationships crowded around, laughing and making noise, seemingly just to slack off and find some fun. Some of the guys who used to oppose him were either hiding in a corner doing some work, or they stood indifferently somewhere, deaf and unresponsive, but their eyes glanced at the lively scene here again and again. Or they quietly slipped out of the room to the old baker's side. There were also some unfamiliar faces. Hot Pie had already gotten the information, knowing that these were all newly recruited apprentices, mostly refugees from the south, who had lower requirements and were satisfied with the 2 black breads a day. But these new apprentices were not just randomly found people. Hot Pie personally heard an apprentice who had been working for several years admit that these new apprentices' skills were no worse than his, or even better. The new apprentices said that they used to work in bakeries before, and if they had not been looted by the rebels, and all the fields and houses had been burnt down, they would still be selling bread in their hometown now. At this time, everyone cursed together the ungrateful, man-fucking Renly who started the rebellion. No one likes war. Hot Pie sincerely echoed, while feeling fortunate for his choice a month ago. Hot Pie knew very well that if he had not impulsively joined the army at that time, he would probably be one of these apprentices now, living a hard life and racking his brains just to fill his stomach. Or maybe not even as good. The unluckiest apprentice had already been kicked out, who knows what he is living on now. The apprentices suddenly dispersed. Hot Pie turned around and saw the gloomy face that he used to fear so much, the old baker. But the anger and ruthlessness on that face disappeared almost instantly, and before Hot Pie could see it clearly, it immediately turned into an amiable and somewhat ingratiating smile. Hot Pie knew that the old baker would only show this expression when facing distinguished guests. Hot Pie also knew that this was because of the hard leather armor, chainmail, helmet, whip, and long sword on his body, because of the crossed swords badge worn on his right arm, the symbol of the Department of the Army. Repeated strict blockades and investigations had made this symbol known throughout the city, and also understood its power and rights. I didn't expect this badge to play some role on the last day. Hot Pie sighed silently. The Department of the Army's badge would soon no longer belong to him. Starting tomorrow, he would wear the more terrifying all-seeing eye badge of the Security Bureau under Minister Ellen Lantle of the Department of Security. This was also the only reason why he had time to wander around the city today. Fortunately, he had received a notice that he was free from the recruit training of the military camp from now on, and would officially report to the Security Bureau with the other 99 people tomorrow. The other 900 newcomers to the Security Bureau would have to continue to be tortured by the instructors until the Security Bureau took them away. That is to say, he was in the top 100 of the 1,000 people. In addition to being excited, Hot Pie couldn't help but wonder why he was chosen. Good mission performance? No private possession of property? Normal attendance? Kept up with the training? Gendry said, "You've been much quieter lately." Hot Pie suddenly woke up. Yes, when did I become like this? He didn't have a clear answer. Perhaps it was because of a certain look he saw during the investigation, a certain sentence he heard, or the smell of blood he smelled. Perhaps it was because of the growing understanding of the Security Bureau. Perhaps it was because of a golden dragon, a badge, the cold light of swords, or the magic of dragon crystals. Perhaps it was because of the divine grace light curtain bestowed upon him. Looking at the dreamlike light curtain, and then looking at the bakery he was in, Hot Pie was so clearly aware of the world-like difference between the two. The past 10 years or so were so grey and vague, not much worth remembering. In comparison, how huge was the impact of this short month on him, completely turning him into another person, a person who was enough to be respected by the old baker. Hot Pie calmed down his agitated mood and earnestly advised his friends to respond to any recruitment orders from the Iron Throne as soon as possible, which could not only practice the divine will and royal orders, but also be the best way out for individuals. Then, he stepped out of the bakery door and moved forward without looking back, towards a bright future, towards the Security Bureau. Now, he was sitting in the surveillance hall of the Security Bureau, peeking at the big shots and chaotic bloodshed he had never been exposed to from the screen, safely, steadily, and excitingly. War, ah! The screen directly in front of Hot Pie showed the hand of the King's Squad and the stubborn commoners. This was a war. The screen on the side was the mud gate by the Blackwater Rush, with ragged clothes and thin faces. Refugees lined up in a line that could not be seen to the end, receiving the registration and inspection of the gold cloaks. This was also a war. Hot Pie's task was to watch quietly, record everything, and report any anomalies, anything. Look! There's movement at the Bronze Gate. In the eager shouts, Hot Pie turned his head to look. The main screen in the center of the hall showed the gate of the Bronze Gate. Countless cavalry of the Crowned Stag banner were pouring into the castle. Chapter 132. Copper Gate City. Dusk. The sound of horses' hooves thundered, horns blared, and voices roared. Looking out, the King's Road to the south was filled with heavily armored cavalry. They formed 3 columns and turned east at the crossroads outside Copper Gate City, heading straight for the castle gate. The countless camps set up around Copper Gate City were awakened. Figures emerged from the tents, lifting the cloth flaps, and seeing the mighty and majestic cavalry passing by, they couldn't help but cheer from the bottom of their hearts. They were infantrymen, a total of 10,000, ordered to gather here. The number was too large. Although Copper Gate City was a strong fortress, it couldn't accommodate so many people, and space had to be reserved for the cavalry guarding His Majesty, so the infantrymen could only camp outside the city. Living in the wilderness was not easy. The earliest arrivals had been sleeping in tents for almost a month, their bedding was already dirty and messy, full of fleas, and smelled terrible. Coupled with the monotonous training and unpalatable food in recent days, all the soldiers couldn't wait any longer. Everyone was looking forward to breaking camp soon. Everyone knew that Lord Tyrell of the Reach had already gathered an army of 100,000 to support His Majesty. Once they reached outside King's Landing, winning would be as easy as spitting. At that time, they would no longer have to suffer in tents. Everyone would live in prosperous King's Landing, enjoying warm and clean beds, delicious food, endless wine, buxom prostitutes throwing themselves into their arms, and one lively banquet after another. Finally, everyone would perfectly fulfill their obligations, pay their blood tax, and return home safely and happily. Perhaps they could also get a silver stag, buy a few more acres of land, and build a mill. Or even, with good luck, catch the eye of a knight or lord, be favored by the great men, stay by their side to serve, and even be knighted. Of course, many people said that there would be no real fighting. His Majesty Renly had an army of 100,000. The little king of King's Landing, Ba, the false king unforgiven by the gods, probably didn't have the guts to stay on the Iron Throne. Some people bet that they would see an empty city when they arrived at King's Landing, that the Lannisters would have fled back to the Westerlands in disgrace, leaving only the common people in the city. Others thought that King's Landing would sue for peace with His Majesty. His Majesty would grant mercy, sit on the Iron Throne that should belong to him, and allow the Lannisters to shrink back to the Westerlands. The false king unforgiven by the gods would join the faith to atone for his sins, or put on black and join the Night's Watch, guarding the icy and snowy wall for the rest of his life, until death. Still others believed that they would not be let off so easily. The Lannisters must pay countless gold, the false king would be executed, all traitors would be judged, and those who had committed crimes would pay the price. In short, no one had thought of failure. This would surely be a relaxed and pleasant war, no one, or very few, would die, and the rewards would be enormous wealth and honor. All it needed was a decree from His Majesty. At this moment, watching the long line of cavalry, everyone knew that the decree was not far away. The approaching cavalry suddenly changed its appearance. A large group of knights clustered together, and tall golden banners overlapped, obscuring the figure in the middle of the knights. Until that suit of armor with the color of the green forest and the helmet with the golden antlers took the initiative to step out of the banners. Renly Baratheon. The soldiers successively shouted and cheered, "Long live His Majesty! Victory! Long live Baratheon! Long live King Renly!" The sound gradually became unified, gradually louder, until tens of thousands of people shouted together, shaking the wilderness, intense and surging, as if invincible. Renly pulled the reins and left the road, stopped by the side of the road, and returned a sincere and generous smile to the surrounding soldiers, even allowing everyone to kiss his boots. Until the smell of dinner wafted over the camp, Renly was gradually cleared of people. The Earl of Copper Gate City, Ralph Buckler, stepped forward to salute, "Your Majesty, your presence is a great honor to Copper Gate City. The Buckler family has prepared the best bedroom, hoping to ease your Majesty's fatigue. There is no need for this. Seeing the warriors in high spirits and strong bodies has already made me satisfied and relieved my fatigue." Renly rode forward, followed closely by a group of earls. "Your Majesty, the 7,000 infantrymen stationed at Haystack Hall are also in high morale, all eager to kill the enemy for your Majesty and overthrow the false king." The heir of Lady Sheila Errol of Haystack Hall, Sir Sebastian Errol, reported, his expression almost like a puppy pleasing its master. Renly nodded appreciatively. Sir Sebastian Errol immediately looked satisfied. Earl Bryce Caron of Night Song City approached to ask for instructions, "Your Majesty, should the 2,000 cavalrymen from Massey's Hook be recalled? Almost everyone there has left. Wait a little longer and see how King's Landing reacts." Renly reined in his horse, turned his head and scanned the earls. "My lords, victory is waiting for us to pick it, but we still need to be careful of the potholes under our feet, and be careful not to be tripped and suffer unnecessary injuries. Before the new news from the north arrives, let's rest well in Lord Buckler's Copper Gate City and enjoy the banquet." Renly chuckled, after that, if you want to have fun, you can only do it in the Red Keep. The earls all smiled and followed Renly into the city. The entire process was faithfully projected by the main screen of the monitoring hall. Until the gate of Copper Gate City was closed and no one was visible. Everyone sit in place, no noise, no running around, wait for the beacon to be issued. The steward in charge of distributing the beacons instructed loudly. The Hota and others, who had undergone rigorous training, were already accustomed to similar orders, tacitly kept quiet, sat upright and looked straight ahead. But no one could keep calm inside. Hota was no exception. Like the other 99 newcomers, he was also wholeheartedly looking forward to his beacon and the important tasks to be carried out next. Renly and 5,000 cavalrymen arrived at Copper Gate City. Recalling the torrent of cavalry, the noble crests that had only been seen in the light curtain, the unfamiliar earls and knights, the presumptuous false King Renly, Hota's heart was still throbbing with excitement. He knew what this meant. The Stormlands rebels had completely assembled and were ready to move out at any time, setting off a frenzy of blood and fire. He, of the Security Bureau, would witness history and change history. Hota, yours. The steward placed a shiny square steel plate in front of him, which was a beacon. Everyone in the Security Bureau knew that the eye could see the whole world, and the beacon determined where the eye would look. The fixed beacon has a name engraved on it, and placing it on the eye can only see fixed locations or people, but it does not take time to determine the target. The live beacon can see many places and people, but it is more troublesome to find the target. This was the first time Hota had been allowed to use a live beacon. Taking a deep breath, he put the beacon into the raised round surface on the side of the screen, entered the password, and the screen immediately began to flash various images. Wilderness, dense crowds, villages, and castles. Hota searched for the gate of Copper Gate City. Ding! The familiar prompt sounded. Hota's attention instantly returned to the Divine Grace light curtain. The glorious task at the top of the light curtain changed its name, Holy Land Glory, Act 2 Divine Grace is Mighty. Hota looked out the window. The sun had already set. Chapter 133. Your Majesty, I have completed my mission. The eastern half of the city has been completely cleared before sunset. Tyrion looked up at the 100-foot-tall giant. This was the throne room that only existed in the light screen. All the ministers were present, but the 3 regents were not. Tyrion had many questions in his mind. Like many others, Tyrion's mission on the light screen had also changed. Holy Land Glory, Act 2. Divine Grace. Divine Grace. Tyrion pondered the true meaning of this word. The previous washing away dust had spanned half a month of operations across various departments, changed the entire King's Landing, and directly overturned the fate of tens of thousands of people. Divine Grace then? How vast would it be? Very good. Joffrey lowered his head and looked faintly at the few small people at his feet. Tonight's meeting is to determine the next stage of arrangements. Under the main theme of Divine Grace, you each have significant responsibilities and must issue various tasks to your subordinates. Issuing tasks. This was what troubled Tyrion the most. The number of prayer stones bestowed by Joffrey every day was gradually increasing, and the supply of Divine Grace cores had also multiplied many times over. Now there were as many as 50,000 divinely favored ones. Courtiers, servants, soldiers. Everyone Tyrion usually came into contact with was under the shroud of the Divine Grace light screen, and so were his subordinates in the treasury. Tyrion's daily work had thus become both convenient and trivial. Want to obtain certain information or understand something? Just contact the person in the know through the light screen. If you don't know the specific person, you can also post a request on the light screen and wait for the person in the know to respond, or the Statistics Bureau and Security Bureau may have the answer. Want to talk to someone? Just talk through the light screen. If you feel that the atmosphere is not right, you can also immediately call that person over through the light screen. Want to assign someone to do something? As Master of Coin, Tyrion had permission on the light screen to issue tasks to the vast majority of people, as long as it was reasonable and legal, and did not cause the security minister or his majesty to question it. With the light screen, even without leaving his house, he could manage government affairs perfectly, and the effect was even better than before. His short legs were finally liberated. But at the same time, Tyrion's rest time was also completely cut or occupied. The light screen not only greatly improved the efficiency of the various departments but also exposed many problems that had always been hidden in the shadows. Slacking, perfunctoriness, waste, corruption, abuse of power, malicious sabotage. Tyrion had to deal with various reports and submissions on the light screen all day long, admonish his subordinates, and give rewards or punishments. He also had to respond to his subordinates' lengthy requests and greetings, understand various trivial information and figures, and issue various tasks that he had never cared about before. With the tentacles of the light screen, his power extended greatly downward, almost reaching everyone. But at the same time, he also had to endure the bombardment of vast amounts of information, remember dazzling people and things, and deal with numerous and endless affairs. The Treasury and the Mint, the Statistics Bureau, the Engineering Bureau, the City Watch. Promotions and transfers, material bills, tax statistics, funding applications, project reports, the King's decree. If all the affairs handled every day were turned into parchment and stacked up, Tyrion felt that it would be at least 2 of himself tall, no, 3. Under such circumstances, he urgently needed to understand the true meaning of divine grace, to see a clear path, so that he could issue tasks and handle government affairs in a regular manner according to this goal, and also be recognized by the king. So, Tyrion cast an expectant gaze at Joffrey on high, waiting for the king's interpretation of divine grace. But as soon as Joffrey opened his mouth, his eyes looked at him. How are the achievements of the various departments at present, and what are the difficulties? You should all make a summary, increase mutual understanding, and communicate information. Tyrion, you can start first. The expectation in Tyrion's eyes disappeared instantly. The other ministers looked over one after another, and Tyrion could only sigh in his heart, and then began to report. The treasury currently has more than 1.5 million gold dragons in storage. However, the purchase of military supplies, personnel salaries and other expenses are increasing day by day, the tax revenue from ports and agents is gradually shrinking, and the mint is short of raw materials. It is estimated that 100,000 gold dragons will flow out every month in the future. The Statistics Bureau has 1,000 formal employees and more than 3,000 temporary workers. A detailed list of industries and owners in various parts of King's Landing has been drawn up, and more than 600 material cost prices and selling prices have been successfully counted, maintaining the overall stability of commerce in the city, and a total of more than 100,000 gold dragons have been recovered in taxes and confiscations. The Engineering Bureau has absorbed more than 20,000 people, and 150 holy art sorcerers. Now the sewers, streets, and ruins have been cleared and rebuilt, the river channels have been dredged, and the King's Landing aqueduct, well, and water pipe system has been completed, and more than 100,000 tons of stone, wood, and soil have been transported into the city. All members of the City Watch obey orders, train strictly every day, and can be put into battle at any time. As for the difficulties, Tyrion hesitated for a moment, but still said his thoughts. It is difficult to significantly improve the finances in the short term, but the expenditure is increasing. I think it is best to borrow again from Casterly Rock. The lion and the stag are one family after all. Joffrey remained non-committal. Lord Tyrion has worked hard and achieved remarkable results, and I can't compare to him. Security Minister Eileen Lantel took over the conversation. Since the Little Birds joined the Security Bureau, there are now 2,000 formal members in the Bureau, more than half of whom are experienced field personnel, scattered throughout the city, while others remain in the Red Keep to perform security work. It is estimated that there are more than 1,000 Little Birds scattered throughout the 7 kingdoms and overseas. In addition, 2,900 trainee members are receiving training from the Army Department. To this day, the Security Bureau's vision has covered the entire King's Landing, identifying more than 500 spies and secret agents, and more than 1,000 rebellious and illegal people. Outside King's Landing, the Security Bureau has surveillance over all castles and fortresses in the Stormlands and the Reach, and the movements and intentions of the rebels are almost completely exposed. Old Oak in the Western Reach still has 30,000 troops stationed there, training every day. But Earl Mace Tyrell has no intention of taking the initiative to attack, and has not responded to letters showing goodwill to us, and has not believed in the divine might of His Majesty in his words. Highgarden has assembled 20,000 new troops and is stepping up training, which is expected to be completed in 1 month. Although the 60,000 rebel troops at Bitterbridge in the Eastern Reach have not moved, Earl Randall Tarley has led a vanguard of 5,000 cavalry north to the south bank of the Blackwater Rush, clearing roads, intending to lure the Westerlands and King's Landing to attack. As a result, traffic on the Gold Road has been cut off, and many lords in the mountains of the Westerlands have complaints and intend to encourage Lord Tywin to move east. Lord Tywin has assembled 40,000 elites in Casterly Rock. More than 20,000 people under Lord Kevin have departed from Harrenhal and are heading south, and are expected to arrive in King's Landing in 10 days. The Iron Islands and Dorne are still standing still. In addition, Eileen announced the latest news: the false King Renly has entered Bronzegate. Chapter 134. It's finally coming. Commander Hound of the King's Guard was eager to try. Your Majesty, the King's Guard's 3,000 holy warriors and 7,000 soldiers are ready. Whether it's defending the city or fighting, there will be absolutely no problem. Minister of the Army, Kingslayer, continued, the families under the King's Landing have all sent troops in response to the summons. Including the new recruits in the city, the Ministry of the Army has 2,000 holy warriors and 10,000 soldiers. In addition, more than 6,000 people belonging to the Statistics Bureau, Security Bureau, and King's Guard are undergoing training. All personnel can be dispatched for combat. Speaking of this, Jaime Lannister couldn't help but feel a little depressed. He painstakingly, together with carefully selected instructors, managed to train so many soldiers, but the majority of them went to others. Especially the Hound's King's Guard. What King's Guard? They are just lazy, useless gold cloaks and paupers who can't even get enough to eat. They completely relied on the strict training of the Ministry of the Army to transform into true warriors, but in the end, the Hound got all the credit. And the number of holy warriors under the Hound is actually more than that of the Ministry of the Army. A full 1,000 more. Jaime would gladly exchange 10,000 ordinary soldiers for the Hound's 1,000 holy warriors. Unfortunately, it can't be done. Jaime knew why. The Hound is Joffrey's dog, and so is the King's Guard. But he is not. Kingslayer, the last king who trusted the Kingslayer, died under the Iron Throne, his throat slit with a sword. What's more? Jaime looked up at Joffrey's face, and that radiant, sun-like golden hair. Jaime's beloved sister had been rejecting him for more than a month. No, even earlier than that, since Robert went north to Winterfell, Cersei had no longer accepted his ardent and sincere love. Jaime relentlessly asked again and again, and finally learned the reason from the Queen Regent's veiled words. Joffrey knows the truth. Jaime had no more doubts about Cersei's unusual behavior. How could she allow her image in her son's eyes to continue to collapse? How could she further fuel the rumors spread by Renly, undermining her son's rule? Jaime didn't have deep feelings for the 3 children, but he understood very well that Cersei loved her children even more than herself. From then on, Jaime's life consisted only of duty and honor, tournaments and wars, being a good King's Guard, a good Minister of the Army, a good Lannister. Even if Joffrey harbored resentment towards him. In the throne room, Grand Maester and Minister of Education Pycelle was reporting good and bad news. Jaime's attention, however, was focused on the 3 empty seats in front of the ministers. Eddard Stark still holds the titles of Regent and Hand of the King, but he himself is far in the north and has never cared about southern affairs. Joffrey is indifferent to this and does not intend to appoint another hand. The Queen Regent is equally nominal. The guests at Cersei's balls and banquets are mostly minor courtiers and ladies who only say pretty words and have no influence on the court. The routine petitions in the throne room are becoming less and less important. It seems they are only using Cersei's beauty to appease the terrified people in the lower city, or using the Queen Regent's willfulness to fob off the complaints of those who have suffered losses. And the Regent and Minister of Justice, Duke Tywin Lannister. Jaime couldn't help but recall his father's request. Withdraw from the King's Guard, restore the right to inherit Casterly Rock, marry and have children. When he heard these words, the first thing that came to Jaime's mind was Cersei's face. If he withdrew from the King's Guard, he would have no reason to stay in the Red Keep and be by Cersei's side all day long. But he quickly remembered the current situation, every meeting had become an ordeal, it seemed better not to meet often. Jaime also thought of his little brother. Tyrion would surely be drunk for days if he knew. Although Tyrion didn't say it explicitly, Jaime knew very well that what his little brother wanted most was Casterly Rock, his father's approval, to be a Lannister. Jaime was still hesitating. He also thought of Joffrey. Would Joffrey agree to his withdrawal from the King's Guard? Or rather, would the king be willing? In the position of a privy councillor, Jaime saw a lot and learned a lot. In just 1 month, the Grey Slight Curtain had bestowed more than 50,000, the army and the court were completely controlled by the king, and the entire King's Landing was therefore powerless to resist and could only be at the king's disposal. And the number of Grey Slight Curtain bestowed is increasing every day, now approaching 10,000, the Grace priests responsible for implanting the core are almost exhausted of their healing power. What would happen if hundreds of thousands of people in King's Landing all had the Grace Light Curtain? Whenever Jamie thought of such a strange and unpredictable future, he couldn't help but feel deeply shocked and confused. In a few years or decades, the Grace Light Curtain will be popularized to everyone under the Iron Throne. At that time, the king will undoubtedly be able to directly rule the 7 kingdoms, without the help of the lords, without fear of the lords. Jamie is not the only one who sees this future. There are also the various ministers, King Joffrey, and the smart people of King's Landing. Will the king and the nobles still live in peace? The bold Baristan began to speak. Jaime's gaze remained fixed on the empty seat engraved with the roaring golden lion. His father should have realized this too. Jamie couldn't help but speculate, perhaps his father returned to Casterly Rock for this reason, and ordered his uncle Kevin to take over the armies of the Vale and the Riverlands. King's Landing is thus exposed alone on the front line, under the blade of the Southern Coalition. Is this a test or a challenge for Joffrey? Or is it just because he believes that King's Landing is strong enough, so he has formulated some kind of more profitable plan? King's Landing can indeed face the rebellion alone. Jamie is convinced of this. Failure is impossible, the only difference is winning more or winning less, winning sooner or winning later. Casterly Rock. Jamie couldn't help but wonder, does Joffrey want Casterly Rock among the spoils of war he wants to win? Would his father agree, because of Joffrey's bloodline? What about Tyrion? Jamie thought a lot, but in the end, he didn't ask any questions. In any case, he could not abandon Cersei and Tyrion. He will always have Lannister blood flowing in his veins, and he also carries a heavy oath, even if others do not take this oath seriously. He came back to his senses. Chief Steward Hannah was speaking. The Logistics Bureau's supply of materials has basically stabilized, consuming 800 tons of grain, 150 tons of meat, 100 tons of pig iron, and 2 tons of dragon crystal per week. He missed a lot of content, but Jamie wasn't in a hurry. The minutes of the throne room meetings will be stored in the light curtain, every word, every person's actions and expressions will not be missed, he can check them privately. As for his distraction, Jamie didn't care. The Kingslayer must be more arrogant than others to be worthy of the title. The weapons and equipment used by the Holy Warriors have been manufactured and the test results have met expectations. Preparations for the construction of the flagship Grace are complete, and the launching ceremony will be held this Sunday. The above. Jamie heard a new name, Grace. Chapter 135. The gods are gracious. After listening to the minister's reports, Joffrey finally spoke. Tyrion and the others immediately perked up, waiting for the king above to give more specific instructions. King's Landing will be elevated into a holy city, untouched by filth, punishing evil and promoting good, with eternal light, infinite power, worshipped by the world, and making mortals submit. Tyrion heard Joffrey's soaring ambitions. Punishing evil and promoting good, infinite power, this is not a holy city at all, it is simply a heaven summoned by mortals, pouring endless karmic fire on evil, and sprinkling vast holy light on goodness, creating a world of glass. But, what kind of evil is burned by karmic fire, and what kind of goodness is bathed in holy light? Isn't it all determined by Joffrey himself? Holy city, listening to this description, it sounds more like a war fortress. Tyrion's mind raced. Joffrey continued to speak, this grand vision will surely be realized. The grace of the gods is boundless. The first step is to let everyone in King's Landing bathe in the grace of the gods, witness the light, and devote themselves to the great cause of building the holy city. Joffrey knew that King's Landing had even greater development potential. As of today, nearly 100,000 people in King's Landing are directly or indirectly involved in the operation of politics, the military, or the magic net system, while other people and resources are only passively following the situation and not playing a significant role. According to his plan, King's Landing must evolve within 3 years to efficiently handle various affairs of the 7 kingdoms and become a true political center. Political orders will be unified and complete. Only in this way can the 7 kingdoms be completely integrated into a whole, without worrying about division. To this end, everyone in King's Landing must become a part of the system, contributing a force to the political operation, and becoming screws supporting the behemoth of power and violence that is King's Landing. King's Landing does not support idlers. The reconstruction of the eastern half of the city is the first step in building the holy city. With the combined effect of magic and advanced ideas, the eastern half of the city can accommodate at least 1 million people, thereby meeting the demand for manpower and attracting talents. Within this year, this half of King's Landing will take initial shape, allowing the world to glimpse the glorious future, willingly dedicate their lives to it, or perhaps allow the heaven on earth promised by the gods to come sooner. Within this year, Tyrion immediately felt a headache. When the king made a decision on a whim, it was the ministers below who had to handle the affairs. Especially him, who was in charge of engineering and finance. Moreover, the war is about to begin completely, and many materials and energy must be tilted towards the south. Various tasks will only increase, not decrease, and now there is such a tight time limit. Alas! Hopefully, there will be no more troublesome tasks next. Tyrion was speechless. Now that the staff of various departments have increased a lot, it is time to move into more formal and professional office residences, so as not to be crowded in the Red Keep. Joffrey stretched out his right hand and pointed to the ground of the throne room. The sunken pool and the model of the continent of Westeros in the hall instantly turned into a blank space, then dyed with color, and the light particles gradually stacked up, turning into a small and exquisite King's Landing. Tyrion looked at the model. Not only was the Red Keep perfectly restored, but the Great September of Baelor, the Dragon Pit, Silent Sisters Street, and even the brothel Tyrion often visited were presented in this model. Although he had seen many similar maps, Tyrion was still deeply amazed by its exquisite detail. Looking at such a model, who would have thought that a few months ago, travel could only rely on hand-drawn rough maps and people's oral accounts, and even the maps used during wartime were not much different. This technology alone is enough to change the course of the war and give one's own army an advantage. Sander, Joffrey shot a white beam of light to illuminate an area directly west of the Red Keep. The King's Guard camp will be located here, guarding the Red Keep nearby, and responsible for the defense of the River Gate and the King's Gate. The Hound lowered his head. Yes, Your Majesty. Another red light shone on an area directly north of the Red Keep. Tyrion, this land will be used to build the Statistics Bureau residence and the City Watch camp. Similarly, the City Watch will be responsible for the defense of the Iron Gate nearby. Tyrion knew that the red light was shining on the wealthy area located under Aegon's High Hill, the properties and villas of wealthy merchants and clans. Of course, now they have all been cut off and owned by the royal family. The number of people in the Engineering Bureau is too large, so they will all live here. Another red light shone on the open space east of the Fishmonger's Square. Tyrion respectfully said, "As you command." Two golden lights shone on the north side of the Dragon Pit and the west side of Cobbler's Square respectively. Sir Jaime, the Gold Cloak's headquarters on the west side of Cobbler's Square is now assigned to the Department of the Army, stationing 8,000 troops to be responsible for training new recruits and defending the nearby God's Gate and Lion Gate. The Gold Cloak's camp on the north side of the Dragon Pit is also assigned to the Department of the Army, stationing 4,000 troops to be responsible for the defense of the Old Gate and the Dragon Gate. Both barracks will be rebuilt and expanded. The Department of the Army and the Engineering Bureau must negotiate well and make plans. The Kingslayer nodded silently. Arin. Joffrey cast a blue light on the northwest of the Red Keep. This will belong to the Department of Security. Although it is not within the Red Keep, it is only a quarter of an hour away, and the transportation is also convenient. Arin bowed and thanked him, with a reluctant look on his face. After all, I am farther away from your Majesty. Joffrey smiled slightly. These places are for the people below to use. You are all members of the small council. If you still want to live in the Red Keep, how could I not allow it? Arin immediately put on a smiling face. That's good, that's good. Tyrion sighed slightly, knowing that he could not move out. Damn it, going to the brothel would require walking all the way from the Red Keep to the western half of the city, which was really troublesome. Grand Maester. Joffrey looked at Pycelle. The old guy's eyes were almost completely closed. He was pretending to be exhausted at this time. What an old fox. What's wrong? Pycelle looked like he had been awakened. Ah, Your Majesty, please forgive me. Old age makes it difficult to stay awake. Perhaps, the gods are about to summon me, Pycelle continued to mutter. Joffrey cast a blue light on the north of Aegon's High Hill and the south of Flea Bottom. The staff of the Department of Education will all work here. The Grand Maester and his entourage do not need to leave the Red Keep and can use the light curtain to command, so as to avoid running around and being tired. Pycelle agreed repeatedly. Another purple light shone between the Department of Security and the King's Guard. Hannah, the Logistics Bureau's residence and transfer warehouse will be built here, which is convenient for supplying the needs of various departments. Finally, a series of beams of light shot towards all parts of the city. The entire church has been successfully changed to the Department of Gospel. The great September of Baylor is sufficient for use, but more magnificent statues of gods are urgently needed. The White Sword Tower will still be the residence of the King's Guard after expansion. The Academy and the Research Institute will be built in Flea Bottom, and the Engineering Bureau needs to strongly support it. There are also the Department of Justice and the Department of the Navy. Joffrey looked at Tyrion. Although Lord Tywin and Lord Kevin are not in King's Landing, preparations still need to be made in advance. Tyrion, you are the most suitable candidate, and you will be responsible for site selection, planning, and construction. Tyrion was already numb. Yes, Your Majesty. So many large projects, and they are starting at the same time. Tyrion only hoped that the plans of the various departments would not be too outrageous. Gods bless. Chapter 136. War Council. Notify all lords to come for a meeting. May the gods be with us. 3 nights passed, and Rep finally witnessed a major commotion in Copper Gate. Rep couldn't contain his excitement, immediately moving the viewpoint of the screen, quickly approaching Renly in the image. The opportunity was rare. The Security Bureau had clear instructions for this situation. The observation angles of personnel monitoring the same target could not overlap, to avoid missing information. In other words, security officers had to compete for positions. In the past few days, Rep had deeply felt the cruelty of this rule. Almost every time he found a suitable position, other faster and more alert colleagues had already taken it, leaving him to choose secondary positions to gather information. As a result, the information Rep reported was either more delayed, more one-sided, or less important than that of other security officers. His task ranking had therefore become one of the lowest. Rep was determined to stay by Renly's side day and night, waiting for the pseudo-king Renly, in his banquets and leisure, to remember business. Now, his efforts had finally paid off. He moved the screen's viewpoint behind the pseudo-king Renly as quickly as possible, then immediately sent a confirmation signal. Only then did Rep completely relax. Once the confirmation signal was sent, a semi-transparent figure would appear on the security officers' screens at the position where the signal was sent, reminding them to choose other positions for reconnaissance. This design could maximize the completeness and detail of the Security Bureau's intelligence. But for the security officers, it was a mixed blessing. After all, with different observation positions, the scenes each person could see were naturally different, and intelligence gathering was inevitably affected. Those who occupied a good position were of course happy, but those who were dissatisfied with their position dared not give up the mission and had to accept their bad luck. Rep knew that his position today should be the best. He couldn't let down the good luck bestowed by the gods. Rep carefully examined everything on the screen. Within a few breaths, more than 100 semi-transparent figures appeared on his screen, distributed in every corner of the hall. Under the gaze of hundreds of eyes, the earls and generals of Copper Gate entered the hall one by one. The War Council was held in the hall of Copper Gate. Sitting in the highest position was the legitimate monarch of the 7 kingdoms, King Renly Baratheon I. The vassals of Storm's End sat on either side of the high platform at long tables, discussing fiercely, or, it could be said, arguing. Unlike those previous joyful and harmonious meetings. This time, the nobles either roared, cursed loudly, reasoned, coaxed and deceived, joked, bargained, slammed the table with wine, or threatened. Debating whether what lay ahead was victory within reach, or a terrifying unknown monster. Renly sat quietly, listening intently. He understood why the atmosphere of this war council was so different. Ravens and scouts from the north had brought the latest news of King's Landing, the Iron Throne, and further north. Was the news true? Renly shouldn't have doubted it, those people had no reason to risk their lives to betray or lie. But the content of the new news was so unbelievable that one couldn't help but be skeptical. Previously known news was mostly normal and favorable. Although the northern forces were gathering, they were not marching south. Duke Tywin was far away in Casterly Rock. Kevin Lannister led an army of only 20,000 to take over the forces provided by the Vale and the Riverlands at Harrenhal. The Iron Islands were still watching. King's Landing had been blockaded since the end of June, and people entering and leaving the city were strictly checked. Credible information became less and less, and intentionally released rumors became more and more. But much intelligence could also be obtained from the people in the Crownlands and outside the city. The forces provided by the Crownland vassals were easy to estimate, and with the new recruits in King's Landing, it would be at most 1 or 2 10,000. People from Wendwater and Massey's Hook had also poured into King's Landing, almost doubling the city's population, and its food supply was heavily dependent on the vale and the riverlands, and the situation of other materials was naturally similar. Joffrey was even more arrogant and conceited. Preaching the end of the world, falsely claiming to be a divine envoy, renaming the church to the gospel department, setting Sunday as the Sabbath, changing the seven gods symbol to a six-pointed star, and even printing it on newly minted copper coins. That's not all. He even sent people to spread the so-called divine grace and divine will, fabricating miracles at the coronation. What giants as tall as hills? What cold god other? What holy warrior army? Clearly, it was just a trick to scare children and fool the people. And the holy city and the murdered bishop. He even used this as an excuse to send troops to loot the entire city, not even sparing the industries of the lords and free trade city-states. Was Joffrey crazy, or were the ministers of the Red Keep all crazy? Renly didn't understand, but he was happy to see it happen. The more similar news he received, the more confident Renly was in his campaign to reclaim the Iron Throne. But Renly looked at the arguing crowd below. Who would have thought that after only 3 days in Copper Gate, the information had completely changed, and the weak and crazy enemy had become a terrifying and magical beast? Was the previous news a carefully crafted trap by the enemy, or was the new news now? Renly finally spoke his first sentence. Joffrey is not a king. How could the gods bless such a degenerate bloodline? Everyone in the hall immediately fell silent and looked at the king. Your Majesty, he is just a madman, like Ares too. Bryce Caron, Earl of Nightsong, looked arrogant and confident, sending only 200 people to fight at Massey's Hook. Can the name Holy Warrior Army be worth 2,000 knights? Only a madman could do such a thing. Calculating the time, my bastard brother Roland Storm is probably already writing good news to your Majesty. Earl Caron patted his chest and guaranteed, the Lannisters' 200 men will definitely be wiped out, and Beric Dondarrion, who betrayed his legitimate king and liege lord, will also be brought before your Majesty to be judged. Caspar Wilde, Earl of Rainhouse, was still worried. It's not just the Lannisters who have seen those people use flames and healing powers, but also many trustworthy good people. The blockade of King's Landing had suddenly become much looser. Therefore, Copper Gate learned from more people's mouths terrible information that had never been received before. The Holy Warrior Army's flames, the instantly healed wounds when implanting the so-called Divine Grace Core, and the uniform caliber coronation miracles. Renly observed each lord with gentle eyes. Lister Morrigen, Earl of Crow's Nest, clearly agreed with Earl Wilde's judgment. Hugh Grandison, Earl of Grandview, looked disdainful. Haywood Fell, Earl of Fellwood, had a calm expression, but Renly could see the anxiety in his heart. Morale was wavering. Renly couldn't rebuke them, wasn't he himself hesitating about this? It was time to move. Renly drew his sword, order the forces at Massey's Hook to return to defense. The entire army will break camp tomorrow and march west along the Fellwood and Greenhaven line to Bitter Bridge. The earls stood up and saluted, Yes, Your Majesty. On the other side. Satisfied, Rep remembered that tomorrow was Sunday, so he decided to go to the Great September of Baelor to worship and thank the gods for their good fortune. The new idol should have been built by now. Chapter 137. The God's Grace launch ceremony was held on schedule on Sunday. Armor lined up, proclaiming its nobility. Lances stood in formation, blessing its might. Horns blared, celebrating its birth. The wide and sprawling docks of King's Landing were already packed with people who had come to watch the ceremony. Besides the dignitaries who had received advance notice and were permitted to leave the city, commoners living outside the city also gathered at the docks, neglecting their work. No one could remain calm after seeing it. No one could bear to take their eyes off it. People were genuinely moved by it. Blessed by the gods. What a great miracle this is! Is this thing really a warship that can float on water? Who can compete with it? The grace of the gods is boundless. Nothing is impossible, the power of the gods is much greater, how can mortals fathom it? Excited and astonished words never ceased. People repeated them over and over again. Even after hearing praises for half a day, they still couldn't help but express their admiration, hoping to release some of the surging emotions in their hearts, so as not to be so excited as to faint on the spot. From last night until this morning, some people were fortunate enough to witness the astonishingly fast construction process of the God's Grace. So they immediately began to vividly describe it to the people around them, their faces full of pride and excitement, seemingly afraid that others wouldn't notice, as if they themselves were the owners of this creation of the gods. The not-so-secret construction process of the God's grace quickly spread among the crowd on the dock. Again and again, people repeated the miracles they had seen, until everyone had heard every description, remembered it in their hearts, and even recited it verbatim. Everyone knew. An endless line of carriages brought countless cargo boxes, piling up into small mountains by the docks in the evening. Sailors and captains said that it was probably more than the total amount of goods that the port handled in a whole day. Subsequently, the Golden River water was covered by a layer of shadow. It was logs floating down from the upper reaches of the Blackwater Rush, solid and thick, very fresh, some even with lush crowns. At least a large forest was felled, which could probably feed hundreds of people if used for farming. All the wood flowed downstream, but was blocked near the cargo box mountains downstream of the dock, almost filling that area of the river into land. Then, the miracle arrived. The adults wearing white cloaks with golden six-pointed stars used divine grace, and the cold, damp wood moved on its own, as if it had come to life, crawling onto the shore. After reaching the shore, the wood seemed to turn into a silky liquid, approaching each other and melting into a mass. The wood was as soft as a lump of mud at this time. Many invisible hands kneaded and pinched the lump of wood, shaping the wood like building a mud castle. The shipwrights pointed to the wooden frame under the God's grace and said, "That's it." Something never seen before, but it was a dock, shaped by divine grace, a dock carrying divine grace. This dock was composed of closely arranged concave wooden frames. Each wooden frame was 4 or 5 feet wide and 5 or 6 fathoms long, and the combined shape just looked like the bottom of a ship. After recognizing the shape of the ship's bottom, all the captains, sailors, shipwrights, and anyone who had lived by the water were immediately shocked and questioned. Such a big ship! What happened later was even more staggering and completely unimaginable. The adults in the six-pointed star cloaks approached the cargo boxes, and the wood used to make the cargo boxes flowed to the outer periphery, leaving only pieces of steel and countless knives, guns, axes, and spears in place. Immediately afterwards, all the steel melted, not into hot molten steel, but still emitting a cold white light. The steel climbed onto the wooden frames, like liquid flowing upwards, like vines climbing trees, like the tentacles and suckers of sea monsters. People had never seen so much steel so closely attached together. They must have been very happy, cheering and climbing to the highest point. When there was no road, they stepped on each other's bodies and continued to climb upwards, gradually forming a mutually supporting skeleton, with the slender shape of a warship. The steel hull lay on the dock. After that, the adults in the six-pointed star cloaks stayed in the dock for a long, long time, until the sky turned white again, until all the surrounding steel and wood disappeared. People only knew that all the materials had become part of the warship. As for how many thrilling changes, how many exquisite structures, solid rooms, and terrifying weapons were inside the hull, they couldn't see it at all, and could only rely on imagination. However, just what people knew and saw was enough to be told as myths and epics. An invincible warship forged of steel. Who can break through its broadside? Who can withstand its ram? Who can ignite its deck? Who can overturn its body? It will become the absolute overlord of the sea. Redwine's fleet? The Iron Fleet? These are no longer enough to compare. Only the vast fleet of Bravos is qualified to compete. As for the outcome, people's eyes were fixed on the God's grace on the dock. As long as it can be launched smoothly, and a dozen or dozens more companions are added, no matter how many warships Bravos has, they are just children who have not grown up. Everyone was fascinated by this magnificent and majestic creation, as if they had already seen the day when the Westeros fleet would be invincible. God's grace stood proudly on the dock, silently proud. The auspicious time has arrived. Tyrion walked behind King Joffrey, holding a bottle of Arbor gold wine from the arbor. "Your Majesty, it is time." Tyrion's reaction to this terrifying warship was no different from most people on the dock. This God's grace was not built by the pyromancers of the Guildhall. Tyrion only saw its appearance this morning. Tyrion then realized that Hannah's logistics department also had a group of pyromancers, and the tasks they were responsible for were even more important, more glamorous than building houses and repairing sewers. Thinking of the weapons and equipment dedicated to the holy warriors mentioned by Hannah in the throne room report, Tyrion became even more curious. But now, the only protagonist is the king and this God's grace about to be launched. Tyrion respectfully presented the tribute in his hand. Joffrey took the crystal-clear Arbor gold wine, turned to look at Sansa beside him. "Sansa, my queen, your kindness will bless its fate, your beauty will soothe its loneliness, your nobility will honor its journey. Let us witness its birth together." Sansa nodded happily, took Joffrey's right arm, and walked to the bow of the ship. The two stood in front of the figurehead, looking at the 7 gods maiden, 10 feet tall, with her arms crossed. Everyone on the deck quieted down, saluting the king, the lady, and the warship with their eyes, witnessing the successful conclusion of the ceremony. According to tradition, Joffrey, acting as the priest, stroked the figurehead 7 times, offering 7 prayers. Then, Sansa threw the bottle in her hand forcefully. Pa! The bottle shattered, and the golden liquid flowed and dripped wantonly on the figurehead. Like golden blood. Chapter 138, Battleship Charge. The drums beat loudly. The soaring horns were even more impassioned and resonant. The maiden figurehead on the prow of the god's grace cradled her arms, emitting a dazzling golden light from her chest, bestowing grace upon everyone on the pier below. Bathed in golden light, people looked up at the invincible warship. Suddenly, the towering wooden dockyard came to life, each wooden frame lowering itself, the ones closer to the river crouching lower, the angle gradually tilting until they became slides. The front half of the god's grace was already suspended in the air and slowly descending. The sound of drums and horns reverberated through the sky. But as they watched the iron-clad warship lower its body and charge towards the black water rush on the wooden frames, people felt that all the sounds were the battle cry of the god's grace. Like a knight charging down a hillside towards a crowd. The god's grace's sharp, knife-like prow cleanly cleaved the calm river surface, and 2 white, foamy waves immediately surged outwards, as if they were flesh and blood cleaved in 2 by the knight's blade. The river couldn't overcome it. Its gleaming iron body swayed slightly, as it slowly moved to the center of the river, cutting off the main channel of the black water rush, calm and steady. 1 breath, 2 breaths. It still showed no sign of sinking. It even turned in place, its bow gradually pointing towards the estuary downstream. Everyone immediately jumped and shouted, hugged each other with smiles, clenched their fists and waved them non-stop, venting the unstoppable heat and strength in their bodies. The god's grace was not a toy on the shore, but a true floating fortress. Woo! The god's grace sounded its long whistle, drowning out the horns and the crowd, all other sounds. Joffrey stood on the prow, looking back at the riverbank. The dockyard built specifically for the god's grace was nearing destruction. On the unscathed high platform behind the dockyard stood a patch of small, dark figures, the VIPs who had been evacuated from the warship in advance. The reason these people disembarked in advance was not because they were worried about the warship's launch failing, but because the content of the Copper Gate City War Council had been presented to Joffrey and a group of ministers yesterday. Renly said, "Advance west along the line of the Rainwood and Greenstone." The Rainwood and Greenstone were both south of Copper Gate. First south, then west, this was not Renly's original planned route. The former Renly proudly planned to travel north comfortably along the King's Road, showing off his power in the Crownlands before crossing the Kingswood and heading west on the Rose Road. Renly's plan would certainly not succeed. The Holy War Army of King's Landing would completely extinguish Renly's ambition in the Kingswood, and not a single rebel would escape into the Reach. But now, just because of a few rumors touting the strength of King's Landing, Renly actually put away his arrogance. Intentionally avoiding the Kingswood? Joffrey didn't know whether to be happy or depressed. Recently, he had loosened some control over King's Landing, both because it was no longer necessary to seal it off so tightly, and also because he wanted to deter the Southern Lords and shake the unity and morale of the rebels before the war. Who knew the effect would be too good, directly causing Renly to change his marching route. Just this morning, at the same time as the launch ceremony of the God's Grace flagship, the 20,000 troops of Haystack Hall and Copper Gate City had already set off south. Their marching speed was not slow. It was expected to reach the Rainwood in 3 days, Greenstone 2 weeks later, and Bitterbridge in early September. The entire journey was at the southernmost tip of the Kingswood. Tyrion therefore strenuously advised, explicitly opposing the implementation of the previously drafted counterattack plan. If the main force of the Stormlands rebels was still pursued according to the original plan, the most likely battlefield for the two armies to encounter would be between the Rainwood and Greenstone, the border area between the Kingswood and the Red Mountains. Far and remote. Logistics were difficult to replenish, the field of vision was narrow and cramped, the roads were winding or simply non-existent. Once entangled or the enemy avoided battle and delayed, when the army from Bitterbridge attacked from the west, flanking from the left and right, the battle situation would inevitably become more troublesome, adding variables and casualties. Tyrion didn't dare say that the Holy War Army would be defeated. Duke Tywin also supported acting cautiously, and Grand Maester Pycelle naturally followed. Duke Eddard did not express his opinion. The Kingslayer and the Hound both craved to lead the army to take the initiative. Elend, Hannah, and the bold Barristan silently served, only expressing opinions within their scope of duties. Joffrey thought about it and decided to make some adjustments to the scheduled battle order, postponing the decisive battle for a few days. This was also why he was still standing on the deck of the God's Grace. Pa! Pa! The Hound walked over, stepping on the receding watermarks on the deck. The warlocks have finished their inspection and are ready to set sail at any time. Joffrey placed one hand on the railing, instantly understanding the entire structure and materials of the ship. This warship was a thorough magical creation. Shaping runes combined thousands of tons of steel and other materials into a whole. Therefore, the warlocks could sense the shape, structure, and damage of the entire warship from anywhere on the ship, so as to improve or remedy it in the first time and maintain the warship's combat effectiveness. Its structure was not scientific enough. The people at the Research Institute had never imagined that steel could also be used to build warships, and the designed drawings could not allow the material properties of ordinary steel to support this huge warship. Fortunately, there was magic. Solid runes were hammered into the hull, and the abundant solid magic energy offset the destruction of gravity and stress, allowing this warship, which would have been impossible to form, to float steadily on the water. Its power system was also full of loopholes. Joffrey could only determine a basic feasible principle. Boiling water. What system converts energy into power to the greatest extent? What structure is the most efficient engine? Where to place the propeller? The most suitable blade shape and number of blades? What materials can support power transmission? Each problem was enough to hold up the construction and use of the warship, preventing the drawings from becoming reality, or destroying the fragile reality. However, the God's Grace was a magical creation that spared no expense. Solid magic energy and recovery magic energy were a perfect combination. Before the magic was exhausted, any deficiencies in structure or materials could be regarded as non-existent. The effect of fire magic energy was also excellent. It could evenly transfer its heat to the entire small lake, and it could also instantly turn a drop of water into high-temperature water vapor of hundreds or thousands of degrees. The best energy source. Paired with indestructible boilers, steam turbines, turbine blades, gear linkages, propellers, and other devices. All problems were solved. Magic bred the God's Grace, allowing this steam-powered warship with an empty weight of 2,000 tons and a maximum load weight of 6,000 tons to be successfully borne. In the future, more and more powerful warships will be summoned to show the power of magic to the world. As for now, the God's Grace was enough. Joffrey retracted his palm from the railing. What about the King's Guard? Are the supplies all ready? The Hound's face was full of excitement and anticipation. All the King's Guard have boarded the fleet, with no one absent. Weapons and supplies are in place, enough for the entire army for 2 months. Good. Joffrey looked at the sea. Then let's set off. Full speed to Storm's End, clear the coast. Yes, Your Majesty. The God's Grace stirred up waves, and a long whistle resounded on both sides of the bank. Immediately afterwards, the sails billowed, the flags fluttered, and the entire royal fleet docked at King's Landing set out. Sailing to the sea. Chapter 139. Night Voyage. Stars twinkled in the night sky. Yet, a large patch of light moved along the northern coast of Blackwater Bay. Reflections on the sea, beams of light shooting straight into the sky, and crisscrossing rays pointing in all directions awakened the residents on the shore. Those sleeping on their fishing boats or in seaside huts groggily opened their eyes, enduring the discomfort as they strained to peer at the unusual light on the sea, lest they be swallowed by a sudden disaster without even knowing it. Fortunately, the shipping lane where the light was located was not close enough to pose a direct threat to the coast, but it was not too far either, allowing people to see a rough outline of the scene. A continuous line of ships. Sails were full, flags were bright, and majestic black stags stood proudly on golden banners, glaring ahead. The source of the light beams and orbs illuminating the dark night was the masts atop the stags' heads. Lookout posts. This was the King's Landing fleet. The fleet of the king blessed by the gods. Many people understood the situation now. The king's fleet had set out. Against whom? Some tried to count the number of passing ships with their naked eyes. But even though they concentrated their minds and each ship was so dazzling, they always inadvertently missed a few, and eventually the specific number blurred, leaving them staring blankly as the fleet gradually sailed away. There must be hundreds, People guessed unwillingly but excitedly as they lay back in their beds or the bottom of their cabins. Unfortunately, the shocking scene had long since dispelled their sleepiness, so they had no choice but to look up at the stars in the night sky, hoping that the twinkling starlight could bring back fatigue and allow them to have a good dream. May the gods protect us. The exact number was 301. 300 wooden ships, 1 steel warship. Wooden ships were easy to build. Ship blueprints were complete and abundant, and with so many ready-made models in the royal fleet to imitate, the sorcerer's work was undoubtedly quite easy. As long as there was enough wood, the original royal fleet could be multiplied several times without even adding magical runes. But wood was not the only limitation, sailors and supplies were scarcer than wood. After comprehensive consideration, the King's Landing fleet was rebuilt and newly built to 300 ships, with a total tonnage of 100,000 tons and a fixed crew of 16,000 people. In addition to the 10,000 guards who were about to land on the coast, as well as personnel in logistics, intelligence, medical care, production, and construction, the total number of personnel on the fleet was about 30,000. This massive fleet was already the maximum that the current King's Landing could afford. Recruiting skilled sailors and reliable captains, preparing supplies, weapons, and special tools, intelligence preparation, personnel arrangements, boosting morale, and propaganda guidance. The fact that these things could be done successfully within a day was all thanks to the institutional reforms in King's Landing during this period. Other forces wouldn't even dare to think about it. In one day, the 200 ships of various sizes in King's Landing port turned into 300 excellent warships, equipped with sufficient sailors and soldiers, and set sail for the sea together. Joffrey really wanted to see Renly's expression when he received this news. It must be wonderful. What's more, there was also this unique flagship, the massive God's Grace made of steel, and it was not driven by sails. I am afraid that this warship is more awe-inspiring than flames and healing. You must know that not only is the terrain of Westeros long and narrow, with rivers and seas intertwined, but life and trade are also closely related to the sea. The free trade city-states across the narrow sea are even more dependent on sea transport and fleets. When the news of the steel warship spreads, the lords of the Seven Kingdoms, the governors and grand princes of the free trade city-states, and the Sea Lord of Bravos will definitely not be able to remain calm. Cannons and giant ships. Joffrey was full of confidence that he could conquer the Seven Kingdoms and conquer the world with just cannons and giant ships. God's Grace is both the beginning and also an experimental product for accumulating experience and data. Future warships will step on its shoulders and move towards a greater peak. Joffrey looked at Qyburn, who was beside him, and the old man was engrossed in murmuring while holding a data sheet. After these few hours of sailing, the data of God's Grace and the consumption of various devices have been initially summarized. As of now, the average speed of the entire fleet is 11 knots, which is about 20 km per hour. The speed of God's Grace is the same. For this reason, it consumes an average of 20 units of fire magic energy and 50 units of solid magic energy per hour. Without a doubt, if the speed is doubled, the consumption speed of the two types of magic energy will also increase greatly, even far more than doubled. This consumption is not too big for Joffrey now. Paying the rune energy to create hundreds of holy warriors can guarantee the self-sufficiency of the warship, and the new rune energy added in one day can create 10 warships. But, compared to hundreds of living holy warriors who can continue to be harvested, is a steel warship really a more valuable choice at this point in time? Fortunately, there is a more perfect solution. Let the crew of the warship become holy warriors, and continuously inject magic energy into the warship every day, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Of course, this is ultimately only a temporary measure during the transition period. If you want to obtain safer and more stable combat power, runes without thoughts and feelings are undoubtedly more suitable. Qyburn's murmuring tone became more and more crazy and obsessive. Joffrey knew that Qyburn was pursuing a more perfect warship structure. The energy contained in 20 units of fire magic energy is much greater than the actual energy consumed by the warship, which means that the useless loss of the power system is very alarming. 50 units of solid magic energy reveal an even more serious problem: the warship cannot exist on its own. Every point of solid magic energy refers to a flaw or loophole, and represents that it has resisted a breakage, disintegration, or even explosion. As the initial model, this is also an unavoidable problem. Qyburn's task is to collect data on the warship and magic energy consumption, analyze and study the problem, and find a better answer. And the abilities of the sorcerers give Qyburn a lot of room for trial and error and improvement. Just sitting in the cabin, Joffrey could clearly feel the changes in the warship under the hands of Qyburn and the sorcerers. From the fleet's departure until now, Qyburn has changed the structure of the boiler 17 times, the turbine blades of the steam turbine 12 shapes, the transmission system 8 times, and the propeller 15 times. And all the positions on the hull that consumed solid magic energy have also been changed multiple times. It is almost a completely exhaustive stupid method. But overall, the consumption of magic energy is slowly decreasing. Optimistically, by the time the fleet arrives at Storm's End, the magic energy consumption of God's grace may be reduced by half. 4 days. Qyburn's task is very heavy. Your Majesty. Joffrey looked towards the door. The red-robed woman Melisandre swayed her waist and gradually approached. The Lord of Light ordered me to come and serve. Qyburn withdrew from the room. Before accepting the gift of the Lord of Light, Joffrey sent instructions to Beric Dondarrion of Massey's Hook and the Red Priest Thuras. Arrive at Stone Dance City before sunset tomorrow and join the fleet. Chapter 140. Red Priest Thuras. Sir Roland Storm, haven't you woken up yet? Don't be so stubborn, persuade your men, enough blood has been shed. Lord Beric Dondarrion sighed and shook his head, his thick golden red hair swaying slightly. Tell them to stop running. There is nowhere to run under the grace of God. That's right, think about the battle the day before yesterday, that kind of scene. Lord Dondarrion's 11-year-old squire, Edric Dane, Earl of Starfall, echoed, his face a little pale, as if he was still unable to let go of the terrifying sight of the battle. The Red Priest Thuras silently sized up the stubborn prisoner. Bound hand and foot and covered in blood, Roland Storm stood up straight, his pock-marked face full of resentment and resistance, without saying a word. A brave and determined warrior, or a stupid and stubborn prisoner. After witnessing that kind of power, he can still behave like this. In any case, Thuras admires his persistence and piety. Bastard of Night Song. Thuras walked up to the prisoner, with raging flames burning inside his wide red robe. Real flames. Not derived from blood, prayer, or sacrifice, but bestowed by King Joffrey himself. Melisandre, a colleague from Assai and a favorite minister in front of the king, is very sure, this is the power of the Lord of Light, spread to the world through the envoy of God. Thuras knew that he should believe this announcement without a doubt. But he knew better that his faith had never been devout enough, whether as a child, in the temple, or in King's Landing. Thuras, who was born in the free trade city-state of Myr, did not voluntarily dedicate himself to the Lord of Light, but was sent to the temple by his parents to prevent his 7 older siblings from starving to death. After that, although Thuras put on the red robe, it was not only for faith, but more for fighting, wine, and women. Perhaps because of this, he couldn't perform superb fire spells, nor could he see prophecies from the holy fire. He was actually sent to King's Landing on this side of the narrow sea, and received a difficult and important task, to make the Mad King Aerys II, who was obsessed with fire, believe in the Lord of Light. Thuras had always been puzzled by this arrangement of the temple. Am I the best candidate? As he expected, he did not successfully complete this task. Wildfire was more attractive to the Mad King than the weak power the Lord of Light had given him. Until Aerys II died in the throne room, the reputation of the Lord of Light was still not obvious in Westeros. So he no longer regarded himself as a priest of the Lord of Light, and concentrated on staying in the court of King's Landing to run his life in Westeros. He even used the wildfire of the pyromancers to add flames to his long sword, rather than the divine power of the Lord of Light. This trick works best for the Hound Sandor Clegane. The emerald green flames of wildfire also helped him survive during the Greyjoy Rebellion, and he was the first to climb the walls of Pike, winning many favors from the people. The court life afterwards was stable and lively. King Robert often drank with him, and there were tournaments that allowed him to win the laurel of the team melee several times with his flaming sword, winning wealth and cheers. Wine, martial arts, women, what a happy day. Thuras no longer thought about Myr and the temple that had become a thing of the past, and no longer lit the holy fire from time to time, seeking guidance from the Lord of Light. However, the death of King Robert changed everything. The 7 kingdoms of Westeros were no longer peaceful, and the turmoil in King's Landing and the Red Keep became even more violent. King Joffrey showed unquestionable miracles and vast power, the power of flame and light was so strange and familiar, and his declaration immediately reminded Thuras of the temple's teachings. Melisandre, who was also wearing a red robe, found him. Thuras has since become a member of the Gospel Department, working with monks and nuns of the Church of the 7 Gods. The seven gods and the Lord of Light coexist peacefully? Not only Thuras himself could not adapt, but the monks and nuns of the church reacted even more violently. Fortunately, the seven gods in heaven did not grant them the power to match swords, and they could not resist the divine power of King Joffrey. The Rainbow Guard sent by Renly to assassinate him at the Great September successfully turned the church into the gospel department. Even so, every time he walked in the Great September of Baelor wearing a conspicuous red robe, every time he prayed to the Lord of Light in front of the statues of the seven gods, Thuras couldn't help but worry about his life. The occasional glances from many monks still made Thuras break out in a cold sweat. How does the Church of the Seven Gods punish heretics? Thuras didn't know much about it, and didn't want to know more terrible details. But he understood that the best way was to never let the Church of the Seven Gods be resurrected, and to work hard to maintain the long-term peace of the harmonious gospel department. The Lord of Light and the Seven Gods, who said they cannot coexist peacefully. In the dark and dilapidated stone house, the flames on Thuras' body burned more violently, and the orange-red firelight illuminated the ruins of the night, and the rich heat dispelled the cold brought by the darkness. Fire, Roland Storm uncontrollably associated with the previous encounter. The Red Priest glanced at him. The night is dark, dangerous everywhere, and the end is coming. That's right, the end is coming. King Joffrey, chosen by the true God, said it himself, and it must not be false. Melisandre took the lead in adding this prayer, and Thuras naturally followed closely behind. Fortunately, the Hero King has already descended. Thuras made a prayer gesture solemnly. Praise the light and flame, praise King Joffrey, praise the one true God, the Lord of Light. Roland Storm struggled to get rid of the painful memories, and regained his indifferent expression, dismissing the Red Priest's words and even spitting. Thuras smiled slightly and shook his shiny bald head. You have a faithful belief, fighting for the so-called warriors among the seven gods, boasting of courage and unyielding. But do you know that the seven gods you faithfully believe in, the Father, Mother, Warrior, etc., with seven faces in one, are also just a few incarnations of the one true God, the Lord of Light? Roland Storm glared immediately. Thuras didn't dare to fabricate things. Melisandre spoke first, and presumably it was also King Joffrey's intention. That's right, after the seven gods and the Lord of Light are united, what is there to say about peace or not? The seven gods are his name, the Lord of Light is also his title, and even more false gods and alien gods are the same. There are only two gods in the world, he who represents light and flame, and the evil god who carries darkness and cold. Thuras induced patiently, Your Majesty has received the will and power of the true God, and the only ones in the world who can be his opponents are the cold god and the end of the world. Justice and victory do not belong to the rebellious Renly. Sir Roland, let yourself go, and let go of the warriors who entrusted their lives to you. Roland Storm didn't say a word. Forget it. Beric Dondarrion lay back on his straw bed. Let's rest early, we have to clean up the rest of the people tomorrow, before sunset. Thuras put away the flames, that's all, just fewer prisoners. In the darkness, Edric Dane's voice sounded, Lord Beric, please let me lead the team as the vanguard, I want to try a gentler method. As you wish. Roland Storm couldn't help but flicker his eyes. Chapter 141. Bruce, have we escaped? The knight, his voice hoarse, leaned against the jagged cliff face, gazing blankly at the western sea, murmuring the question to his companion. The west coast of Cape Marseille had been ravaged into desolation by the 2,000 cavalrymen under their command. Not to mention the seaside villages and towns, even the fishermen on the boats had long since gone to the safer north to make a living. The sea was empty, not even half a boat could be seen. For a fleeing defeated army, such a beach seemed to be the best route. The deserted beach was concealed enough to allow them to stay away from the remaining people on Cape Marseille, avoiding making any noise that would startle the hunters. Moreover, they had lost all their supplies. If they didn't want to spend their time hunting and gathering fruit, collecting food in the ruins, giving the hunters time to catch up with them, the answer seemed to be only one thing. The beach. The tide would bring many shells and small fish, and for them, who were on the road all day long, the seafood they saw was enough to fill their stomachs. The only problem was fresh water. There would be some puddles of accumulated fresh water behind the rocks and mud flats, but for them, with hundreds of people, it was just a drop of water poured on a bonfire, disappearing without a trace with a sizzle, and the flames were still hot and thirsty. Without enough fresh water, they would die of thirst before they could get out of Cape Marseille. Everyone knew that. But to go deep inland for this, risking approaching those small rivers and lakes? Anyone with a sane mind also understood that the guards of Sharp Point City and Stone Dance City, the hundreds of monsters that suddenly appeared, these hunters would definitely stare at every water source, waiting for them to walk into the trap. Fortunately, this was only the third day they had fled south, and the situation had not yet become serious enough to cause disputes, looting, or even fratricide. Fortunately, it rained heavily yesterday. The powerful raindrops hit every inch of their skin, and everyone looked up to the sky, moistening their chapped lips, letting the raindrops fall directly into their open mouths. Finally, everyone filled every tool that could store water, showing a rare smile. If they were lucky enough, they would be granted several heavy rains one after another, enough to replenish fresh water, but not so heavy that the sea level would rise, or even a storm would occur. But even so, the rain was not all beautiful and kind. More than 20 companions had already fallen on the road. Some had wound infections, some had high fevers, and some simply fell headlong while walking. Obviously, the rain had bestowed hope, but it had also given a test. Only those with the strongest will and the strongest bodies could possibly go south all the way, pass through Cape Marseille, cross the border of the royal territory, and return to their homeland in the storm lands. This would take at least half a month. After all, they had been defeated too thoroughly, with only their armor and weapons with them, no horses to ride, and no rations to sustain their lives. It is no exaggeration to say that their current situation is even worse than those refugees whose villages and towns have been destroyed. You know, in order to allow as many refugees as possible to go to King's Landing to be a burden, they gave each refugee 2 weeks of rations and other basic supplies. And those monsters that destroyed the entire camp had not considered what they needed on their escape route. For 3 days, they lacked food and fresh water, endured the scorching sun and cold dark nights, and experienced wind and rain, monsters chasing after them, and the continuous death of their companions. How far have they gone? Have they escaped the hunting range of those monsters? The knight lowered his head, staring blankly at the black sleeping lion on his breastplate. Let sleeping lions lie, the Grandison family of Gulltown had always taken this as their motto, expressing the peaceful meaning of the sleeping lion, while deterring foreign enemies who dared to invade. The sleeping lion was already so powerful, how dare anyone wake it? But on that night 3 days ago, the flame monster that suddenly appeared launched a night attack, waking the sleeping lion from its slumber. What was the result? Amidst the raging fire, steel, and roars and howls that did not sound like those of humans, Norbert Grandison woke up suddenly from his bed, and then confirmed the reality: someone was attacking. Where did the people come from? The sentries had no warning at all. Norbert Grandison immediately woke up his servants, and while hurrying to put on his armor, he pondered the strangeness of it all with a face full of disbelief. By the order of the earls, their 2,000 cavalrymen would go north all the way to Sharp Point City at the northernmost tip of Cape Marseille, destroying all the villages and towns along the way, so that everyone would have no one to rely on and flee to King's Landing. The mission had been going very smoothly. They did not waste their energy on hard-to-crack castles, but only took care of the villages and towns. The scattered knights and guards of the various lords could only shrink inside the city walls and stare blankly. Once they dared to come out to resist, the only ending would be to be beheaded or captured. By this night, they had cleared most of Cape Marseille, leaving only a small area around Sharp Point City in the north. The land there was even more barren, and the population was probably only a few thousand or tens of thousands. The mission was about to be completed successfully, and the guards of Stone Dance City and Sharp Point City were still cowering in the city and dared not move. Even so, they still acted cautiously. Norbert himself, Sir Bruce Buckler of Bronzegate, Sir Hartfell of Fellwood, and Sir Roland Storm of Nightsong each led a team. But since entering the territory of Cape Marseille, their 4 teams had gathered in one place every time they camped. This time was no exception. A full 2,000 cavalrymen were stationed together in the nameless town between Sharp Point City and Stone Dance City. The scouts sent to various places had all returned safely, reporting that everything was normal, and there were also sentries and patrol teams taking turns on duty at night. With such careful and thorough arrangements, how could they be quietly attacked at night? Norbert couldn't figure it out. But when he walked out of the door, everything he saw in front of him made him feel like he was in a nightmare. Endless flames were roaring, dancing, and flying. People were burning, horses were burning. Weapons, houses, and even the ground were covered with layers of fire. The air was as hot as being in a steamer, and the field of vision was as bright as broad daylight under the scorching sun, but it was red. How could the flames be so thick? This must be a nightmare, right? A gust of whirlwind blew past, and the hot but humid air rushed towards Norbert's face, making him even more convinced that he was in a dream. How could the flames in reality be so humid? But the shouts and battle scenes from all directions still made his heart beat faster, and he couldn't help but tighten the long sword in his hand. Drop your weapons and surrender, and you will not be killed. Norbert turned around abruptly. The owner of the voice was shouting in another direction. Good opportunity. Norbert approached quickly and lightly. But he soon stopped. The silver-white cloak behind that person was embroidered with a golden hexagram, but it was undamaged, as if it had just been washed. As expected, it's a dream. Norbert was hesitating whether to continue approaching. The man took out a ball from the bag around his waist and threw it into the distance. Boom! The ball shattered, flesh and blood splashed, and a layer of white mist slowly covered the air. Then, the man turned around. He saw him. Chapter 142. Lay down your weapons, surrender and you will not be killed. Lay down your weapons, surrender and you will not be killed. The loud voice repeated over and over, seemingly tireless. This voice was the nightmare of everyone in the Stormland army. The Stormland soldiers who were originally resting in the shade of the beach all jumped up and ran wildly forward subconsciously. No one felt that they should try to resist. But their steps quickly slowed down dramatically, until they stopped in place or even collapsed, as if they were trapped in a quicksand made of sand and gravel. The reality was even more terrifying than being trapped in quicksand. Demonic figures stood on the road ahead, wearing fiery red armor and silver-white cloaks. The soldiers who had not completely despaired slowly retreated, nervously and quickly observing their surroundings. There were also dozens of monsters behind the team, and the rocky mountains and earthen slopes to the east were dotted with figures, forming a sparse encirclement. Sparse, but indestructible, without loopholes. We still couldn't escape after all. Norbert Grandison sighed. For some reason, he felt a little relaxed, as if he had unloaded the heavy stone that he had been carrying all the time and was welcoming the destined future that he would eventually face. Bruce Buckler, who was beside him, finally spoke, I wonder how much we are worth. Norbert Grandison glanced at him in surprise. This guy had always been taciturn and resolute in his actions. Now he actually intends to surrender. How could he not know his own worth? Norbert knew that a healthy knight general from the Buckler family was worth a ransom of 100 or 200 gold dragons, which was not outrageous. As for the other knights and cavalry, those with family backgrounds would most likely be guaranteed safety. Those who could not afford the price of regaining their freedom would depend entirely on the mood of the enemy army. In comparison, Norbert himself and Bruce were considered lucky. They were closely watched by the Lannister people, spending their days on horseback, in secret rooms, or in dungeons, waiting for the two sides to begin exchanging prisoners, or for Lord Renly and the family to send the ransom. At least it was more acceptable than death. Moreover, he had already done his best to be loyal to His Majesty, and even if he failed in the end, he should preserve the dignity of the family and face it calmly. Norbert Grandison stood quietly. If he surrendered, could he really wait for the day of exchanging prisoners? When will the war end? Recalling the scalding white steam on the night of the raid, Norbert Grandison had a faint premonition in his heart that the day of returning to his family and reuniting with his parents, wife, and children would come unexpectedly early, or late. Bruce, Norbert, everyone. Norbert raised his head, and a familiar pockmarked face appeared behind the Lannister soldiers. Roland Storm shouted loudly, please stop fighting this pointless battle. We have indeed failed, but not because of cowardice or arrogance. This is not our shame. In the name of a warrior, brave warriors should laughingly accept life or death, victory or defeat. I have received the promise of Earl Dondarrion. I, Roland Storm, swear on my honor that every warrior who offers his sword and gives up resistance will be properly settled, with their lives safe and free from humiliation. That's right, I guarantee it in my name. A red-armored warrior took off his helmet, revealing golden red hair and a handsome face. Norbert saw the purple forked lightning emblem on the starlight on his breastplate. Earl of Blackhaven, Beric Dondarrion. Beric Dondarrion was not nervous at all. From the moment he set off from King's Landing, he knew that his mission would definitely be accomplished. The difference was how great his own casualties would be. In order to ensure that none of the 200 holy warriors sent to him by King Joffrey were missing, Beric Dondarrion tried to remain humble and steady. He did not run directly to the target. Instead, he chose to take a boat to Tidehead Isle north of Massey's Hook, where he contacted the Dragonstone fleet to prepare a battle plan. The information sent by the Security Bureau has always been detailed, accurate, and timely. Beric Dondarrion quickly discovered a good opportunity to attack, and immediately led his team on warships to land on the west coast of Massey's Hook, 20 kilometers south of Sharp Point. This was the closest location on the west coast to the rebel camp. Without a moment's rest, all the holy warriors marched on foot, relying on the priest's ability to restore their physical strength. They moved quietly along the way, avoiding scouts and eliminating outposts based on the Security Bureau's information. In less than half a day, they approached the unsuspecting rebel camp. It was late at night. The devastated ruins of the small town had fallen asleep, with only a few patrolling soldiers wandering around. With the help of the Divine Grace light curtain, the 200 holy warriors communicated with each other and dispersed according to the plan, forming a neat encirclement, and then took out the droplets tied around their waists. The droplet was a portable weapon specially designed for the Holy Fire Warriors by the Logistics Bureau. The whole thing is spherical in shape, with horizontal and vertical stripes engraved on the steel shell, looking a bit like a peeled pomegranate. One hand can just hold it tightly or throw it out. The sealed steel shell is filled with a ball of clear water. When using it, the Holy Fire Warrior only needs to infuse it with the power of flame. After a breath or two, the steam bursts out in an instant, the steel shatters, and the high-temperature water mist spreads everywhere, instantly turning the area within 10 steps into hell. After using it once, all the Holy Fire Warriors praised the droplet. Before this, their flame power could only be stored in their bodies for a long time. Once it left the body, it would instantly turn into flames and high temperature. The power of flame is limited. If they had to use a large range or a long dragon-shaped flame to kill distant enemies, the consumption would be so great that it would not be able to support the entire battle. Therefore, close combat is still the first option for the Holy Fire Warriors. Now, the droplet just makes up for this deficiency of the Holy Fire Warriors. Although they don't know how the droplet delays the outbreak of flame power, it does not prevent the Holy Fire Warriors from using it to achieve a perfect victory. After everyone was in position, Beric Dondarrion issued an order. Throw! 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 Every Holy Fire Warrior threw 3 droplets in a short half-breath. The town's patrol hadn't reacted yet. The continuous explosions and roars drowned out all the noises, and fragments, high temperatures, and white and light red water mist swept everything. Beric Dondarrion led the charge, and 200 holy warriors attacked together. Stables, baggage, barracks. The Holy Fire Warriors rushed straight to their targets, unleashing flames and destroying the rebels' reliance on launching counterattacks. The Holy Shield Warriors charged back and forth among the enemy troops, without any defense, only caring about killing the enemies in front of them. As a result, they were unscathed, while others were either dead or injured. A few priests and warlocks were responsible for assisting their teammates and did not actively kill the enemy. But if anyone dared to provoke them, a fleeting wound and distorted earth, stone, and steel would be enough to make them doubt the reality of the world. The night raid plan was successfully completed. Half of the 2,000 rebels were either dead or surrendered, and the other half who escaped had no horses or rations, and even lost their armor and abandoned their swords. Next is the cleanup. Compared to the scattered defeated soldiers in the inland, this large group of defeated soldiers on the west coast was easier to hunt down, so they were put to the end. Originally, they could have been tortured for a few more days, but there was no time. Stone Dance City before sunset today. Calculating the journey, Beric Dondarrion urged, "What have you decided? Leave your lives to witness the future, or silently sleep at the bottom of the sea." Norbert and Bruce looked at each other. They threw their swords into the sand. Chapter 143. Outside Rainhouse City. Your Majesty, the people have been brought. Lord Beric Dondarrion of Blackhaven respectfully gazed at the back of the valiant king standing at the bow of the ship. Even though he had long witnessed the boundless charm of divine grace, Beric Dondarrion was still deeply shocked by what he had seen and heard at sea these past 2 days. It was definitely a great miracle in the history of warfare. In 2 days and 2 nights, the massive fleet had actually travelled from Stone Dance Castle to the waters near Rainhouse City. This was a full 200 leagues of voyage. Converted into the new units established by Divine Grace Light, it was a distance of nearly 1,000 kilometers. Even a single swan ship, traveling at its fastest speed, even with favorable winds and calm seas, could not guarantee traveling such a long distance in 2 days. Not to mention a fleet of over 300 warships carrying tens of thousands of people. especially this steel warship under his feet. Beric Dondarrion knew how terrifying it was on the sea. It did not need sails or oars, relying entirely on steel and divine grace for unstoppable movement. The massive fleet was more of a burden to it. If it didn't need to wait for the slow fleet, this divine grace could probably have reached its destination a day earlier. And the seemingly slow and useless fleet was actually the most powerful sea fortress Beric Dondarrion had ever seen, enough to rival or even defeat several times its number of warships and enemies. He had seen it with his own eyes. On the Robert's Hammer ship, the Grace Priest accompanying the ship used his ability to rejuvenate all the sailors and crew on the ship, leaving them without any fatigue. The fleet was thus able to sail day and night. On the Fury ship, the Grace Artificer was immersed in repairing and patching up the ship, unable to extricate himself. Every day and a half, the entire ship seemed to be rebuilt once, brand new, with a more beautiful and solid structure, and smoother sailing. On the deck of the Glory of Tide's Head, there were no catapults or crossbows, replaced by steel tubes that were integrated with the deck, manipulated and moved at will by the Grace Artificers. This device was called a cannon. Water and fire, Beric Dondarrion couldn't help but marvel at the wonder of this combination. Pouring clean water or sea water directly into the steel tube, then using one or several iron balls to block the opening, aiming the tube, and the holy fire warrior stepped forward to inject flames. Bang! The steel roared, white mist billowed, and a terrifyingly huge splash of water immediately erupted on the distant sea. Some of these steel balls were even terrifying creations similar to water droplets, but they were larger, and the explosion was even more violent and scorching. It was hard to imagine what the scene would be like if this thing hit someone. Unfortunately, Beric Dondarrion knew that whether he wanted to or not, this unknown but certainly terrifying scene was about to unfold. Ahead was Rainhouse City. Unfortunately, the wild family of Rainhouse City supported Renly Baratheon in his rebellion. Even more unfortunately, Rainhouse City was located on the north shore of Cape Wrath, bordering Shipbreaker Bay, and the offshore waters were deep enough, and the castle was close enough to the sea. Deep enough for warships to pass through, close enough for the water balls of the cannons to shoot into. With a single order from the king, the ruthless water and fire would unreservedly display their icy coldness and scorching heat. Steel would also bring its hard and sharp advantages into full play. Just one order. The warship under his feet trembled imperceptibly, and the waves in Beric Dondarrion's heart were much larger than this, excitement, surprise, fear, and sighing stirring his heart together. With one order, how many people would die because of this, how much glory and honor would be dimmed and annihilated. How many more such orders would be issued? The night was deep. The turbulent waves beat against the steep cliffs, stirring the silent fleet. Beric Dondarrion gently raised his eyes. The king's back was dark and deep, and the light came from the Rainhouse City in front, reflecting a firm outline, as if to bring the whole world into his palm. Time seemed to have passed for a long time, and it seemed to be just a moment. The king turned around. "Lord Beric, you have worked hard. I am willing to serve your majesty." Beric Dondarrion took a step back, giving way to the four figures behind him. Sir Hearthfell of Fellwood, Sir Roland Storm of Nightsong, Sir Bruce Buckler of Bronzegate, and Sir Norbert Grandison of Grandview. According to instructions, these four knights who led the rebels boarded the ship with Beric and his party at Stone Dance Castle, while the other prisoners were handed over to the Dragonstone fleet. But in the past 2 days, this was the first time the king had summoned them. Compared with Beric, these four Stormlands knights were obviously more unable to resist the great shock brought by this dream fleet. All of them were restrained and fearful, lest they anger the owner of the fleet and bring disaster to their families. Norbert Grandison also clarified that answer. If there were no blessings from the gods, Lord Renly's demands would be almost impossible to succeed. And the day I return to my family, I'm afraid it will be very, very soon. Under the moonlight, Joffrey carefully examined the four captured knights and the four families behind them. Bronze Gate is close to the King's Road and is the north gate of Storm's End. The location of Fellwood is not important, but Renly is now marching towards it, and the most likely front-line fortress when receiving news of the fleet's attack is Fellwood. Nightsong is the first echelon of power in the Stormlands, good at fighting, but claims to be the commander-in-chief of the Borderlands, with no small ambition. Grandview, what a loud name! Joffrey looked at Norbert Grandison. The sleeping lion is not sleeping well. Why did you rashly participate in the rebellion? Aren't you afraid of bringing disaster to your family? Norbert Grandison replied respectfully, "Please forgive me, your majesty. The Grandison family has sworn allegiance to Storm's End. although knowing that the danger is heavy, although it will inevitably bleed and sacrifice, it can only go to the abyss without hesitation. Joffrey chuckled, the king and the liege, which is bigger? Norbert dared not answer. Many people think that the oath to the liege should be obeyed more. Joffrey took a step forward. But in my dynasty, the liege to whom any lord and knight first owe allegiance can only be me. There is no doubt, do you understand? Norbert bowed deeply. Renew your oath, now, to the liege you first owe allegiance to. Joffrey ordered. After a brief silence, Norbert knelt on one knee, his voice trembling as he made the oath of allegiance. Joffrey turned to the next person with satisfaction. Hearthfell, what is your answer? After taking Storm's End, the decisive battle will probably be at Fellwood. Hearthfell could not resist. Bruce Buckler? You have seen the divine grace on the warship, can the Bronze Gate of Bronze Gate resist such steel and fire? Bruce naturally did not have the courage to stand still. Roland Storm. The Cairn family of Nightsong has added hundreds of thousands of refugees to King's Landing. Lord Windwater and Lord Massey demand justice. What level do you think is appropriate? The bastard of Nightsong also swore an oath. Lord Beric Dondarrion of Blackhaven followed closely behind, swearing allegiance to the king more than to the liege. He was already doing this. Joffrey turned around and looked at Rainhouse City. Prepare. Chapter 144. Woo. Woohoo. Woohoo. The shrill sound of the flute echoed continuously across the entire sky. Like the melodious and resentful wails, crying to the cold, angry waves, like the ferocious and terrifying hisses, screaming towards the Rainhouse City on the shore. All the warships simultaneously activated their lights, and Broken Boat Bay under the dark night instantly became as bright as day. Large schools of fish, attracted by the light, curiously surrounded them, crowding together in dense masses in the sea, almost filling the deep waters. The humans in Rainhouse City, however, fearfully lit beacons, rang alarm bells, and summoned the sleepers. Someone is invading. Hundreds of ships are coming from the sea. A fleet, the fleet of King's Landing. The terrifying light allowed them to see the enemy's numbers and majestic appearance. Stop sleeping. All men to the city walls. Put on your armor. Take up your weapons. The shouts of the night watchmen, accompanied by the clanging of bells, spread from the watchtowers, but the terrifying, drawn-out cries from the sea sounded like thunder, and the eerie tones made people's hearts tremble and their souls stir. Human shouts could not even carry 10 steps. The guards quickly realized that they were simply doing useless work, but fortunately, the enemy's alarm also served to remind everyone, and with even better effect. Lights successively lit up in the towers and houses within the city, and many people went out to investigate without even dressing properly. The watchtower's beacon fires and the guards' postures finally conveyed a clear signal to the city: enemies were invading from the sea, and they were very powerful. The pirates of the Stepstones? The squids of the Iron Islands? The royal fleet of a petty king? After climbing onto the city walls, people saw the answer. Countless warships emitted bright white light, and the flags on the sails and masts were all uniformly black-crowned stags on a gold background. The royal fleet. How could there be so many ships? The knight who uttered the exclamation was carrying a shiny helmet under his arm, the top of the helmet inlaid with the blue-green whirlpool sigil of House Wild. Lord Caspar. The guards respectfully saluted the master of Rainhouse City. Everyone stared at Caspar Wild, their eyes filled with unease and anticipation, as if the fate of everyone rested on Caspar Wild's next words. Caspar Wild's expression was serious, and he was rapidly calculating the current situation in his mind. For various considerations, he did not personally lead troops to respond to Storm's End, but instead allowed his uncle, Sir Mond Wild, to lead the team to participate in the war. However, later information made him somewhat regret his decision. The support of the Northern Three Kingdoms for the Iron Throne was less than expected, while Highgarden's performance was more firm and generous than anticipated. Victory seemed beyond doubt. At that time, what if His Majesty Renly misunderstood the loyalty of House Wild? Caspar Wild then gathered more troops and prepared more supplies, intending to personally lead the army north to reinforce them. The scheduled departure was tomorrow. But now, Caspar Wild gazed at the fleet on the sea, which was so bizarre that it seemed like a mythical story, and the scales in his heart couldn't help but swing again. Could it be that those outrageous rumors coming from King's Landing were really not rumors? And those descriptions that seemed absurd even when heard as stories were all realities that King's Landing was currently experiencing? At least, the powerful fleet in front of him was real. Caspar Wild stared at the fleet, and together with everyone in Rainhouse City, listened to the almost endless cries, guessing the meaning and power it symbolized. After an unknown amount of time, the soul-stirring cries finally subsided and stopped, replaced by a calm declaration that resounded throughout the castle. By the order of His Majesty King Joffrey I of the houses Baratheon and Lannister, to punish the rebels and cleanse the coast. House Wild blindly serves the usurper Renly, fueling the arrogance of the rebels, disregarding peace, ignoring the people, and betraying the king to whom they swore allegiance. The crime is enormous, how can it be tolerated? Now we come across the waves to clarify the truth, to correct the public's perception, and to warn others. Listen. Rainhouse City is given 1/4 of an hour to raise the white flag and welcome the king outside the city with all its members. You may still be pardoned for your sins, retain your fief, and be allowed to be the vanguard for the king. Otherwise, the time when men and horses fall, the castle collapses, and the family name is ruined will arrive immediately. Don't say you weren't warned. The emotionless, flat tone of the male voice announced the intention that Rainhouse City feared and worried about the most, announcing a terrifying disaster. No one could ignore these invisible and intangible words. The fleet in the sea emitted a strange light, standing still in the angry waves, giving the words the heaviest weight and the most dazzling color, becoming a decree symbolizing authority. Everyone's eyes were focused on the Earl. Caspar Wild held the helmet in front of his chest tightly, his expression grave. Who will win the throne? What choice should House Wild make? Is now the moment to make a decision? Caspar Wild was in a state of confusion. This war should not have been a disaster for House Wild. House Wild only needs to follow tradition, firmly pledge allegiance to its liege lord, fulfill its duties faithfully, fight hard and abide by honor and oaths, surrendering with dignity. Then, whether successful or defeated, at least they can continue to exist under the new king and keep the family's castle. However, surrendering now, even in the face of an irresistible fleet, can it be considered loyalty? He knew the answer. Now, the war has only just begun, and after Massey's Hook, Rainhouse City is likely to be the second piece of land to welcome the flames of war. Surrendering at this time will never be understood by the lords, let alone tolerated by Storm's End. If Storm's End achieves final victory, and His Majesty Renly happens to remember this incident, House Wild will face a crisis of decline and even destruction. Compared to such a risk, even having the castle razed to the ground by the royal fleet is more acceptable. Dying to be loyal to the liege lord, the family's reputation will be more glorious, the lords will all admire and praise it, and the king cannot openly accuse it. After everything is settled, the new king will definitely not harm the feelings and traditions of the nobles, and House Wild will be reborn, and will continue to pass down the fiefdoms, taxes, and titles of thousands of years. Lord, time is almost up. His servant couldn't help but remind him. I know. Caspar Wild stroked the familiar sigil a few times and firmly put on his helmet. Moreover, Rainhouse City is a fortress carefully built by generations of the family, at least it can hold out for a while, waiting for reinforcements, a great storm, or the withdrawal of the royal fleet. Caspar Wild was still quite puzzled by the fleet's attack. Why is the royal fleet so eager to occupy this rainforest of Cape Wrath, making such a big fuss? Go to Storm's End, go to the Eyrie. Why waste precious time in Rainhouse City? There was no time to think about it any further. Caspar Wild immediately instructed the sculler, release the raven to report the news, to Storm's End, to Stonehelm. The blackbird circled the tower a few times and flew far north, without any obstruction. A quarter of an hour arrived. On the god's grace, Joffrey sighed. All troops, bombard. Chapter 145. The banners of the House Wild fleet began to shift. Caspar Wild calmly surveyed the stone-built walls. Tonight's battle would be the fiercest and most brutal. He knew he had to remain calm, project confidence and determination, to inspire the soldiers to fight bravely and defend the castle. Victory was almost impossible, but they could try to hold out longer, waiting for a turning point. Caspar Wild was confident in the defense of the castle. Thanks to the previous summons, the city now had as many as 1,000 soldiers, including 200 elite warriors such as landed knights, sworn knights, and mercenary knights, and enough food to last everyone for several years. With such strength, holding Rainhouse City was more than enough. Even another 1,000 people could not all stand on the city wall at the same time. Relatively speaking, the number of enemies who could launch an attack at the same time was also limited. After all, Rainhouse City was not built specifically for people to besiege. The seaward side of its city wall was surrounded by turbulent waves and steep cliffs. Even if the fleet approached the closest point, it would not be able to land, and the catapults 1,000 paces away posed no threat. As for the other 3 sides of the castle on land, all the roads were winding, the mountains and rocks were uneven, and the forests were dense. Small units were fine, but large armies could hardly form a formation in this kind of place, and could only disperse and advance towards the castle, wave after wave, like a gentle tide. Caspar Wilde was convinced that warriors who grew up by the sea would not be afraid of the tide. Hundreds or thousands of enemies would surge up, and the guards of Rainhouse City would rely on the solid fortress to resist the tide, using swords, arrows, hot oil, and rolling stones to repel the tide. Round after round of tides, the fortress would still stand, until the tide lost its strength and completely receded. Of course, this tide was too angry and arrogant, and its power was too strong. I am afraid it would take a long time and a lot of blood to make it subside. Caspar Wilde watched quietly. The fleet on the sea was slowly moving towards the castle, adjusting its position. What was this for? What was the use of just moving around on the sea without sailing to the shore to send people to land? Catapults could not throw that far. No one could solve his confusion at this time, so he turned to look inside the city. The movement here was much more normal. Several commanders he had personally appointed were giving orders on his behalf, urging archers to climb the arrow towers, instructing messengers to deliver combat plans, and monitoring soldiers and servants to boil hot oil, debug crossbows, and carry arrows and stones. Caspar Wilde was very satisfied with the progress. At this rate, by the time the enemy launched an attack, Rainhouse City would have been fully prepared and could pour out the most violent counterattack power against the enemy. Hopefully this will calm King Joffrey down. From the loud announcement just now, Caspar Wilde knew one thing: King Joffrey was in the fleet, waiting for the Wilde family to welcome him. Unfortunately, among the 2 kings, the Wilde family could only stand behind His Majesty Renly. "My lord." A scout ran over breathlessly. Outside the city, there are a large number of enemies, on the east, south, and west sides. Caspar Wilde's hair stood on end. He quickly turned his head to look at the fleet in the sea, blinked hard, and the fleet was still in place. The still bright light in the sea reminded him that the fleet had raided here silently, and it was normal to land some troops in advance. Time was running out. Caspar Wilde quickly asked, "Have they already attacked the city?" "Not yet, my lord." The scout continued to report, "We were ordered to leave the city to scout for information. But as soon as we left the city, those people came out of the forest. The brothers who were close were killed, and we in the back could only hurry back to the city." However, the scout said half fortunately and half doubtfully, "They did not try to seize the city gate, not even close to it." Caspar Wilde was even more confused. 3-sided encirclement, what a good opportunity to attack, but they just watched in the forest? The scout added, "The enemy general leading the south side calls himself the Hound, Sandor Clegane, commander of the King's Guard. The east side is led by Brienne of Tarth. The west side." The scout paused, seeming extremely unexpected, "Is Sir Guy Wilde." "Guy Wilde? Say it again." Caspar Wilde could guarantee that this was definitely the most shocking and angry moment of his night. Guy Wilde was his cousin. This kid's parents died, and he was taken care of by the family since he was a child. How could he become a traitor after only a year in King's Landing? The scout finally added, "Sir Guy Wilde, he wore white armor and a white robe. The King's Guard." Guy Wilde actually became a member of the King's Guard. Caspar Wilde swore that nothing could shock him more. Whoosh! Bang! The whistling sound, the sound of rocks colliding, and the screams came together with the gravel and the smell of blood. Caspar Wilde instinctively raised his hand to block in front of him, bending over to dodge. After reacting, he straightened his body and looked at the section of the city wall where the chaos occurred. Hiss! An iron ball the size of a human head was deeply embedded in the inner parapet of the city wall, carrying half of a soldier's body. A large gap had been ploughed out of the outer city wall, and shattered stones were scattered in the messy passage. Half a corpse and 4 or 5 screaming or silent soldiers were lying on the ground. At this time, more noises and screams rang out from all directions, and the city wall trembled and shook. Caspar Wilde stiffly turned to face the outside of the city. Under the shroud of white light, a cloud of white mist rose from the decks of the royal fleet from time to time, and swift black shadows rushed towards the castle, destroying everything in their path. Iron balls fell on the rocks, walls, battlements, and inside the city. Gods! Caspar Wilde murmured blankly. Why did you give King Joffrey such terrible power? Why did you let the world suffer such a disaster? He looked at the largest warship in the fleet. The white mist rising from this warship was also the most continuous, like long dragons. Was King Joffrey on this ship? Boom boom boom. Hundreds of warships shouted together, and white mist filled the sky. Caspar Wilde stared desperately at the front, and countless small black dots gradually grew larger and quickly disappeared from his sight. Immediately afterwards, the ground shook, sand and rocks soared into the sky, and the city walls wailed constantly, almost collapsing immediately. Boom boom boom. Steel cracked, air waves surged, and a humid and scalding gale swept across the city wall. The fragile flesh and blood bodies shattered, danced, like a cluster of red roses in a storm, and the tortured petals fell and dissipated into the world. Caspar Wilde closed his eyes sadly and disheartened. All the sounds he heard were so chaotic and disordered, people's shouts stopped abruptly, the sound of stones exploding was drowned out by even larger explosions, and the walls and ground were all vibrating. After an unknown amount of time, the air calmed down a little. He opened his eyes, and white mist filled the air, and he could only see within a dozen steps. Raise the white flag! He suddenly remembered. Raise the white flag! He kept shouting, and he was also at a loss as to what to look for. Until a scorching heat wave exploded beside him. Chapter 146, Governor. Boom! The God's Grace proudly roared, its main cannon firing, causing the entire deck to momentarily halt. A few breaths later, the white mist from the muzzle began to dissipate, the high-temperature steam gradually merging with the air, finally not scalding the skin. The entire gun crew immediately rushed forward, executing operations methodically according to training procedures. The first to move was a warlock acting as a safety inspector. He was responsible for clearing residual water, inspecting and maintaining the condition of the ship's cannon and surrounding deck, ensuring a safe and stable environment for firing. Another warlock served as the spotter. The spotter first reported the results of the previous shelling to all members of the team. Then, he scouted the situation of various targets, consulted with the gun captain to determine the next target, and adjusted the ship's cannon's azimuth and angle accordingly. Finally, he filled the gun chamber with an appropriate amount of water and shells in sequence. At this time, the gun captain, who had been standing motionless at the console at the rear of the gun, began to input fire mana into the ship's cannon and constantly monitored the blue control panel on the gun barrel. This control panel was the core of the ship's cannon. Various key information was displayed on the panel, and many buttons for controlling the ship's cannon were arranged on it. From the panel, one could see the amount of fire mana input, the consumption and remaining amount of fortification mana, the weight of the water and shells loaded, the estimated muzzle velocity, range, and target hit. The functions of the buttons were even more extensive and obvious. There were buttons for firing shells, for adjusting whether the shells would explode at a fixed time, a fixed distance, or upon impact, for increasing or decreasing the energy contained within the shells, and so on. This was a veritable artifact for the holy fire warriors. Originally, flames would erupt upon leaving the hand, but on the panel, they were so tamed and quiet, able to be activated whenever desired, and with whatever amount of power desired. How perfect, how powerful! Thus, the position of ship's cannon gun captain became a coveted role for all holy fire warriors. But currently, there were only a few hundred ship's cannons, while the number of holy fire warriors on board was more than 10 times that number. Most people could only stay on the ship and do nothing. Fortunately, after Rainroof City was captured, the land war was not far off. At that time, everyone would have the opportunity to go into battle, kill enemies, seize glory, win back the kingdom for the God-chosen king, and then establish a happy and beautiful earthly paradise. May the gods protect us. While Rainroof City on land was collapsing, the crew of the God's Grace paid no attention, only looking at the king's back with adoration and awe. Just looking at this back could draw infinite power and confidence. Victory was beyond doubt. Amidst the roar of the ship's cannons, everyone was firm in this fact. Geoffrey stood quietly at the bow of the ship. He was monitoring the control panel of the ship's cannons, evaluating the performance of the gun crews. This was the first actual combat for the ship's cannons. Shells, personnel, control panels, etc., all components needed to be tested and gain experience. Especially the control panel of the ship's cannons. This panel was a creation personally designed by Geoffrey, researched and produced jointly by the Research Institute and the Logistics Bureau. It integrated information runes, light runes, fortification runes, fire runes, etc., and was more expensive than the ship's cannon itself, naturally holding great expectations. According to the plan, the control panel should greatly improve the accuracy of the ship's cannons, rationally allocate the output and consumption of mana, ensure the safety and standardization of the gun crew's operations, and guard against and avoid any dangerous behavior of damaging or stealing weapons. At the same time, for subsequent optimization, research, and control, all data from the panel was backed up in the God's Grace light curtain system and could be called up for viewing at any time. Therefore, Geoffrey had a thorough understanding of the status of each ship's cannon behind him. Just like the main cannon not far away. God's Grace 400mm main gun target point, Rainroof City main castle top floor. Loading 97 kg of clear water containing 2 units of fire mana, loading 1 600 kg high explosive shell containing 50 units of fire mana, impact explosion. Estimated muzzle velocity of 800 meters per second, consumption of 4 units of fortification mana. The gun captain raised his left arm and shouted, "Ready! 5, 4. The other team members immediately moved away, and there was no one in front of the muzzle. 1. Fire! The gun captain pressed the shell launch button on the panel. The 2 units of fire mana in the clear water were then activated, briefly and continuously generating high heat expanding steam, propelling the shell to accelerate again and again. Boom! The shell flew out of the chamber at high speed, rotating and tearing through the air, whistling towards its prey. Bang! A violent blast of air erupted inside the top floor of Rainroof City's main castle, and countless tiny fragments poured out from the windows and breaches, white mist appearing and gradually dissipating. The hideous wound on the towering black stone wall was then clearly visible. At least one floor had been cleared. Geoffrey was quite satisfied. This ship's cannon initially calibrated 3 solid shot rounds, the third hitting the target, and then switched to high explosive shells of the same weight, maintaining good accuracy. The situation of the other ship's cannons was similar, and after stabilization, they could basically hit the target range. The training is almost done. Geoffrey issued a ceasefire order, and the hundreds of ship's cannons quickly calmed down, no longer unleashing their power. At this time, Rainroof City was full of devastation. The side of the city wall facing the sea had completely become a pile of rubble, and the towers and high castles in the city were also scarred and the walls were incomplete. The Hound and other shore-based troops began to enter the field, clearing out the remaining enemies and collecting prisoners and supplies. In fact, this was just the final cleanup. In the previous fierce shelling, almost all the people who could still move had escaped from the various city gates, resulting in surrendering voluntarily or passively, and almost no one dared to resist anymore. Currently, the number of dead people in Rainroof City is definitely several times more than the number of living people. The fact is indeed so. The Hound and others only dug out dozens of living people with relatively complete bodies and 200 or 300 guys waiting to die from the mess everywhere. Geoffrey stepped into Rainroof City, and the whole city was welcoming him. King's Guard Garthwild limped to his side, seeming to want to say something, but ultimately remained silent. Geoffrey stopped and looked at the terrified prisoners. Divine power has descended, and divine grace is not far away. In the name of God, I forgive you. In the name of the king, those who offend again will not be spared. All the prisoners immediately knelt down to thank him for his grace. Geoffrey smiled gently. All priests, do your best to heal the wounded, bestow divine grace, persuade them to walk on the right path, and help the light. The priests then used their abilities. As long as there was still a breath, the wounds would immediately heal, and the broken limbs would be reborn. Only the pale blood color declared the previous unrest. Then, the priests took out pieces of dragon crystal. From then on, no one dared to harbor resentment or even rebellious thoughts. Miracles are so obvious. Without a doubt, the gods have made a choice, causing the world to submit. The true king is already destined. Geoffrey turned to Sir Garth. Where is Earl Caspar Wilde? Is he still alive? Garth Wilde silently shook his head. Geoffrey patted him on the shoulder. To die in war rather than in bed, Caspar must feel a little relieved. Geoffrey withdrew his palm. The fleet will set sail this morning. Rainroof City needs someone to take care of it. Garth, I hereby appoint you as the governor of Rainroof City, to appease the people, act as an agent in political affairs, and take care of the Wilde family. What do you think? As a king's guard, Garth Wilde could only give one answer. As you command. Chapter 147, Contract Achieved. The hall of Rainhouse City was undamaged. Bathed in the intense glow of light magic, the hall was even more magnificent and radiant than usual, resembling a palace where victors gathered. But the atmosphere was clearly not so light and joyful. Outside the hall, soldiers who had landed and entered the city were still searching everywhere, voices calling for help rising and falling, occasionally mixed with screams of agony. Inside the hall, Joffrey sat high on the throne. A group of generals and courtiers stood in the hall below the steps, silently, their eyes fixed on a mother and son in the middle of the hall. Bran Stark, wearing chainmail and hardened leather armor, with a six-pointed star cloak fastened on, fulfilled his duties as a servant, offering fine wine to the seated Joffrey, his eyes also involuntarily glancing at the mother and son below. This war was different from what Bran had imagined. Cavalry charges were nowhere to be seen, and decisive battles with swords were almost non-existent, only the booming of ship cannons filled with terrifying and mysterious power. Bran's expectations were dashed. But from another perspective, this scene was even more shocking than he had originally imagined, possessing a strange charm that was hard to describe, more captivating than the scenery from the tower and the clash of swords. Knights, magic, magic knights. Bran knew he had climbed a much higher tower and seen a more distant world. That world was full of the unknown and magical, with endless treasures waiting to be explored, and countless stories and legends waiting to be created. Bran certainly could not shrink back. He even solidified an even cooler dream, to become a Kingsguard with the most stories, to create the name of a mighty magic knight, even more resounding than the Dragon Knight. On the warship, Bran firmly believed this. However, what Bran saw and heard after entering Rainhouse City added a touch of melancholy to his heart. The shattered stones and castle-shaking explosions were not all that the ship cannons had created, there were also more scenes that people were reluctant to recall. Bran was not a child who had never seen blood. His father's great sword ice, dark as black smoke, swung down, and the head of a Night's Watch deserter rolled to the ground, a cavity of blood splashing on the snow, as red as the summer red of fine grape wine. Bran stared unblinkingly, directly at the bloodstains. Martial arts training, horseback riding and archery, historical stories, all kinds of daily life were teaching him what combat and death were, teaching him to understand and accept, to dedicate and sacrifice. Bran was well aware that war would kill people, many, many people. People would fight for their sworn liege lord, for the beliefs in their hearts, for the king and faith, for their family and loved ones. Death was indeed worth fearing, but people always had to be brave and take up their swords. That was humanity. Stories were born from war, history was created in swords, and families flourished in war. But Bran had just learned that when ship cannons roared, castles and warriors would shatter together, shattering so ugly, so without dignity. War had changed. Castles were no longer impregnable fortresses, the terrible obstacles described at length in countless wars and epics, but graveyards for soldiers, targets for ship cannons. The castles should be crying about this. Knights were no longer holding longswords, falling bravely and regretfully, but a mixture of steel and flesh, a pile of mottled red mud, without any emotion. Such death was undoubtedly the most terrible. Bran even thought of Winterfell, wondering how many such attacks Winterfell and its tenacious defenders could withstand. Fortunately, it was just a hypothetical. Winterfell was not an enemy of ship cannons, and Sansa was going to marry King Joffrey. Rainhouse City was too unlucky, the Wild family. Bran recalled the heraldry taught by Maester Luwin, Wild, a large blue-green whirlpool on a gold background. The family motto was "Call the wind and rain." Unfortunately, what came this time was not ordinary wind and rain, but an unprecedented flood. Bran looked at the mother and son in the hall with pity. Joffrey turned to the Hound and asked, "Sandor, does the late Lord Wild have no heirs?" The Hound glanced outside the hall, "They're all dead." Castellan Garth Wild added, "Apart from his cousin's family, the next in line is little Ricard." Garth looked at the young boy in the woman's arms in the hall, his voice slightly fluctuating. Little Ricard's father died in the previous shelling. Fortunately, Lady Alice Ann Valping is safe and sound. With her mother's careful care, little Ricard will surely become a qualified lord, loyally serving his majesty. The woman in the hall bowed respectfully, her movements just right, without a trace of resentment on her face. Joffrey knew that the first step today must be taken smoothly and cautiously, otherwise it would inevitably trigger more intense chaos and resistance. Castellan. Garth was a direct descendant of the Wild family. If he hadn't joined the Kingsguard, Garth himself would have inherited the title of Lord at this time. Using him as the first Castellan of Rainhouse City, the voices of protest would not be too loud. Similarly, Alice and Valping's family, the Valping family, was far away in the Riverlands and had almost no influence on Rainhouse City. As a widow and orphan, and with the identity of a stubborn rebel, it was already great luck to be able to inherit the title and wealth without being deprived of everything. How dare they demand the power to rule? At least until Ricard came of age, this mother and son would never dare to raise objections. 5 years was enough for Joffrey to achieve his goal. Only a ceremony was missing. Joffrey looked down at the plainly dressed Alice Anne Valping. Lady Alice Anne, do you agree to let Sir Garth temporarily hold the title of Castellan and administer the affairs of Rainhouse City for the Wild family? Alice Anne Valping's tone was respectful. It is an honor for little Ricard and Rainhouse City to have a good person like Sir Garth to preside over affairs. Joffrey nodded faintly. That's good. The Wild family can live in peace, and Rainhouse City can continue to operate, fulfill its contract, and assist in quelling the rebellion. I can rest assured. This was Joffrey's plan. The nobles who had inherited their positions for generations only needed to enjoy wealth and honor, while the Castellans would be directly appointed by the royal family to carry out decrees and teach the people. Of course, in the short term, it would only be a plan. Considering the backlash from the old forces and the large number of elite talents in the noble class, the new Castellans would still be mainly appointed from the families of the various lords. But there would still be the most important change. The rulers would no longer be decided internally by the various families, but would be dominated by the will of the throne. Lord Ricard Wilde. Joffrey beckoned to the 11-year-old boy. Come forward, accept the investiture, swear allegiance, and pass on the Wilde family. Alice Anne Valping encouraged her dazed son with a gentle look. Ricard stepped forward alone, walking step by step to the king, kneeling on one knee, learning the oaths he had heard and seen before, and making a contract. Joffrey placed one hand on the top of his head and released it after a long time. Contract achieved. Chapter 148. As of now, we have rescued 375 people from Rainhouse City, housing a total of 1,439, all of whom have been implanted with divine grace. 621 of them can be incorporated into the auxiliary troop ranks. Inside the hall of Rainhouse City, the accompanying Logistics Bureau's quartermaster was reporting respectfully. In addition, there are 300 war horses and military horses, 700 pack oxen and horses, over 5,000 tons of wheat, grain, fish, and meat, over 3,000 pieces of military weaponry, 100 sets of plate armor, and about 2,000 other sets of armor. Hundreds or thousands. Joffrey had anticipated these numbers. Especially the number of captives, which was hardly satisfactory, but also normal for this era. After all, sturdy stone castles mostly would not or could not accommodate too many people. To allow castles to operate independently as much as possible, be self-sufficient, and reduce the consumption of stored grain and wealth, the manpower of a castle was usually required to be functional. Servants, grooms, cooks, maesters, monks, guards. Under the premise of ensuring basic defense capabilities, the fewer the number of people inside the castle, the longer it could hold out and the greater the chance of safety. If it weren't for the planned reinforcement northward, the population within Rainhouse City would only be smaller. As for the other spoils, weapons and armor were not worth mentioning, only fit to serve as raw materials for the sorcerers, to be reforged. Horses and livestock were strategic materials in all wars, but they were clearly a drop in the bucket for the massive army on the fleet, and also outdated. Only the 5,000 tons of grain was still somewhat useful, enough to appease the people and win hearts. In any era, ordinary people only care about their own lives. Only when their basic survival needs are met do people not care who rules or who is in charge. The people of Rainhouse City were naturally no exception. Joffrey looked down. The newly appointed governor was standing next to that mother and son, obviously wanting to ease the relationship. The young Earl Ricard was still somewhat restrained and uneasy, but he did not seem to dislike him, who shared the same bloodline, and was even quite close to him. Lady Iona, who had lost her husband, behaved politely and distantly. Ha! A Rainhouse City, a governor backed by the king, a young earl with legitimacy, and a mature and beautiful noblewoman. What an interesting combination of characters. Joffrey seemed to have already foreseen the complex grievances and entanglements, love and hate, and a wonderful drama mixed with power and emotion, that the Wilde family would face in the future. But, none of this mattered anymore. The curtain of change had already been lifted, and Rainhouse City's struggles were futile. They could only become pawns charging into battle, contributing all their strength to the throne. The wild family of Rainhouse City was the first, but it would not be the last. More governors were about to be born. Joffrey scanned around, scrutinizing his generals. Now deploy the next step of the battle plan. Everyone immediately became serious and upright. Silently, a dazzling light and shadow, a map of Westeros, appeared on the floor of the Rainhouse City Hall. At the very end of the hall, the young Earl Rickard Wells looked blankly and astonished at the magical and exquisite map, and unconsciously looked at his mother standing beside him. Lady Iona Valping tried her best to maintain her composure and etiquette, and gave her son a comforting smile. As if he had received some kind of shield, little Rickard turned his head with peace of mind, curiously searching for his Rainhouse City on the map. With the combined effect of words and patterns, Rickard quickly found it. On the lower part of the east side of the entire map, on the south side of a large island, a small model of Rainhouse City was located on the northeast corner of a large protruding land. Earl Valerian. Hearing the king's summons, Munford Valerian stepped forward respectfully. Joffrey extended a finger and drew a line near Rainhouse City, bypassing Dorne to the south, directly to Arbor on the southwest corner of the map. The entire Third Fleet, plus 1,000 men from the 10th Regiment of the Guards, should express friendship to Earl Pakester Redwyne of Arbor as soon as possible, reach an alliance, and form a joint fleet to defend the kingdom's peace. Joint fleet. To eliminate hidden dangers, and to strengthen the naval power at the fastest speed, deterring the lords of the Seven Kingdoms and the forces across the narrow sea, Joffrey had long been eyeing Arbor. Obviously, with the abilities of the sorcerers, the only factor that could restrict the development of the fleet at the moment was talent. Where was the talent needed by the fleet gathered? Large fleets. And in today's Westeros, the only formed and standardized naval forces are the Iron Fleet of the Iron Islands and the Redwyne Fleet of Arbor. The target was narrowed down to two. The Iron Fleet was still hesitant, its allegiances unclear, and far away on the Sunset Sea on the other side of the continent, holding the barren Iron Islands, unruly and rebellious. From the perspectives of both threat and benefit, the priority of the Iron Fleet could not be considered high. Correspondingly, although the Redwyne Fleet of Arbor had not participated in the war, it was only because of the Redwyne twins being held in King's Landing. Its political stance had always been consistent with families such as the Tyrells, Hightowers, and Rowans, posing a greater potential threat to the throne. At the same time, the discipline of the Redwyne Fleet was much better than that of the Iron Fleet, good at obeying orders, and more suitable to be incorporated into the battle sequence of the Royal Fleet. And the influence and territory of the Redwyne family were also more crucial than the Iron Islands. Subduing the Redwynes and that elite fleet would greatly increase the strength of the Royal Fleet. The coastline of the Westeros continent would be under control, and no one would dare to rebel again. Joint fleet. Joffrey was determined to get it. Earl Valerian, your mission is important, do you have the confidence? Munford Valerian did not hesitate at all, and gave his guarantee with excitement, Your Majesty, please rest assured, I will be able to facilitate the alliance within a month. Earl Valerian seemed to see victory and glory beckoning to him. He did indeed have this confidence. The Third Fleet and the 10th Regiment of the Guards, it did not sound eye-catching, but Earl Valerian knew the powerful strength of these two troops well. The expanded Royal Fleet had been redivided into 6 sub-fleets. Except for the 6th Fleet, which remained on Dragonstone, the remaining 5 fleets each had 60 elite battleships, all equipped with ship-borne cannons. Munford Valerian was in command of the 3rd Fleet. Total tonnage of 20,000 tons, 3,000 official crew members, including 600 sorcerers, 100 priests, 300 holy fire and holy shield warriors, and 200 ship-borne cannons. With this fleet alone, Munford Valerian was confident in razing Arbor to the ground. Not to mention the 10th Regiment of the Guards. During this time at sea, all the guards had been granted the power of divine grace. In other words, having the 10th Regiment of the Guards meant having 1,000 holy warriors capable of landing operations. How could Arbor resist? Munford really couldn't think of it. Horace, Hobart. Joffrey looked at the Redwyne twins again, one of whom was wearing a white robe. Chapter 149. Summer Sea Guardian. The Redwyne twins looked very alike, both with orange short hair and square faces covered in freckles. But everyone present could tell them apart. Wearing a white cloak and a pure white shield emblazoned with a sigil, the King's Guard was undoubtedly Horace Redwyne, the one raised as the second son. Horace Redwyne, whose breastplate was engraved with a purple grape emblem, bowed and said, "Please give us your orders, your majesty." Joffrey smiled faintly, "You two have been in King's Landing long enough, why not go home with Earl Velaryon and take a look, and convey my greetings to Earl Pakester." The meaning was clear. The Redwyne twins could go home. Releasing the Redwyne family's hostages meant giving up important bargaining chips. The king's decision should have shocked many people, prompting them to offer advice or harbor secret doubts. However, no one showed a strong enough reaction, not even Horace and Hobart. Everyone was very clear. The mighty fleet at sea was worth more than 1,000 words, more direct and powerful than any hostage or promise. Compared to the 200 cannons of the Third Fleet, the Redwyne twins' inclination was insignificant, and the attitude of Arbor was equally irrelevant. After all, the Arbor's castle was no more difficult to break than Rain House. The Redwyne twins saluted together, "Thank you for your majesty's consideration. My father will surely feel the royal family's sincere concern, come to his senses, and be loyal to the true king." Joffrey nodded, "That would be best." After showing power, it was necessary to show grace. Joffrey generously stated, "After the two fleets are merged into one, you two brothers can continue to lead the ships originally belonging to the Arbor, and the Arbor will also become a permanent port for the royal fleet." The royal fleet permanently stationed at the Arbor? Horace and Hobart were silent, unsure whether to thank him or express the difficulty of accomplishing this. The Redwyne family had been defeated and had surrendered, but could they accept a foreign fleet stationed there? The two brothers didn't know if their father could tolerate it. Joffrey was very confident in the generous conditions he offered. It was just stationing troops. Having seen the power of the cannons, Earl Pakester would naturally accept it. Moreover, as long as the Redwyne family straightened their position and sided with the Iron Throne, this condition would not be a restraint or punishment, but a sought-after reward and a symbol of closeness. However, to achieve this as long as, it was indeed a bit difficult. This as long as meant that the Redwyne family had to make their own choice between king and liege lord. This was never easy. Joffrey was well aware that before the gods bestowed their grace, there would be no unified correct answer to the question of which is greater, the king or the liege lord. What's more, the great families of the Reach had long intermarried. In terms of affection, history, contracts, and common interests, the Redwyne family's first choice could only be the Tyrell family, which represented the Reach. How could the Reach, the most fertile and populous region in the Seven Kingdoms, be an alliance of interests? It must be divided and conquered, each broken down one by one. The Arbor, isolated overseas, was the best breakthrough point in the Reach. Joffrey then said, "Everyone has witnessed the contribution of the Redwyne family. They have cleared pirates, guarded trade routes, made the summer sea in the south a thoroughfare, and benefited all the people of the Seven Kingdoms." The Redwyne twins didn't know why, but they knew that this was just a prelude, and the next words would be the real key. Joffrey took out a roll of documents. "The royal family will naturally not turn a blind eye to lords who have rendered meritorious service. I hereby specially decree the title of Guardian of the Summer Sea to Earl Redwyne, commissioned to guard the sea frontier, defend against foreign enemies, and protect sea lanes." Horace and Hobart were immediately stunned, and many people in the hall couldn't help but waver. The Summer Sea extends eastward to the southern coast of Essos, and southward to the northern coast of Sotho-Rios. Westeros, Essos, and Sotho-Rios, the Summer Sea in the middle of these three continents is prosperous and vast, and its area is probably comparable to the entire continent of Westeros, or even much larger. What did the title of Guardian of the Summer Sea represent? Did the Redwyne family from now on own the entire Summer Sea? Everyone looked at the king. There was also a question: the Summer Sea did not belong to Westeros, nor did it belong to the Iron Throne. Joffrey threw the letter of appointment down. The Redwyne brothers hurriedly reached out to catch it, almost dropping the scroll on the ground because of the jostling. Joffrey pointed to the ground in the center of the hall. The map on the ground had become the entire known world at some point. Not only the Summer Sea, but with the grace of the gods, the royal fleet will traverse every sea area, the Narrow Sea, the Shivering Sea, the Jade Sea, the Sunset Sea, and even more distant and unknown worlds. Before long, I'm afraid that the quotas for the Guardians of the Seas will not be filled. Everyone realized, yes, who could resist such an invincible fleet? The vast ocean was about to be included in the Seven Kingdoms. Horace, Hobart. The Redwyne brothers looked up at the king blankly. Joffrey instructed, "The position of Guardian of the Summer Sea is of great importance. Be sure to persuade Earl Pakester to accept the appointment, integrate the fleet as soon as possible, clear the sea, and declare sovereignty. The Redwine brothers' expressions and eyes spoke the answer. Joffrey was satisfied. He had shown his majesty with cannons and bestowed grace with the summer sea. How could the Redwine family refuse? The alliance of the Reach was about to be torn apart. At the same time, the changes in the Stormlands would be more rapid and thorough. Joffrey's mind moved. The map on the ground returned to the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. The Redwine twins retreated into the ranks. Joffrey continued to draw lines on the map, south from Rain House, then west, the lines half encircling Cape Wrath, and then inland to the west. Everyone followed the path of the lines to sea. The first place they passed was Greenstone, on Estermont, the family of the king's grandmother. The next was the weeping town of House Whitehead, located on the south coast of Cape Wrath, adjacent to the Sea of Dorne. It was the largest trading town in the Stormlands, rich and prosperous, and worth the effort to occupy. West of Weeping Town was Stonehelm, where the Red Mountains and Cape Wrath met, and the castle guarded the mouth of the Slane River. Sir Barristan Selmy of the King's Guard came from House Swan of Stonehelm. West of Stonehelm was Black Haven, the stronghold of Earl Beric Dondarrion, a military fortress guarding the Boneway to Dorne. West of Black Haven was the end of the route, the Harvest Hall belonging to House Selmy. Sir Barristan. Joffrey turned to the captain of the King's Guard beside him, Barristan Selmy. The entire 4th Fleet of Earl Sunglass, and the combined action of the 7th, 8th and 9th Regiments of the Guard, will be under your command, Ser. The spoils of victory were 1/3 of the Stormlands. Chapter 150. 1/3, or even the entire Stormlands. The reason Joffrey personally led the army on this expedition was not just to quell Renly's rebellion. The Stormlands are the most delicious cake. Great destruction, great construction. Although the 7 kingdoms of Westeros are sometimes turbulent, the system and hierarchy in the general direction have long been stable and even rigid, and can hardly be regarded as great destruction. Naturally, it is difficult to great construction. Even if Joffrey insists on promoting reforms, attacking the lords, and overturning everything in the past, it will obviously cause long-term and continuous turmoil, causing greater division within the kingdom. The Holy War Army's military force and the illumination of the Divine Grace Aura can guarantee the suppression of any rebellion or conspiracy. But it cannot convince everyone. If this situation really develops, Joffrey's rule will definitely be more troublesome. Either beheading and rectifying all day long, or fighting wits with courtier nobles who are good at disguising their thoughts. Similarly, if power cannot be concentrated, the road to expansion and conquest will inevitably be delayed or even stagnate. That would be boring. It just so happened that the Stormlands and the Reach launched a rebellion, which was perfect for breaking the situation. War will cause great chaos. Great destruction, great construction. The lords of the Reach will not resist to the end, and it is still the granary of the 7 kingdoms, so it is not suitable to cause too much damage. Joffrey's plan is to slowly disintegrate and divide. For example, the ennoblement of the Redwine family, and the actions against the Tyrell, Hightower, and Rowan families. The Stormlands are different. Not only is the Stormlands closest to the Crownlands, but Joffrey himself is the rightful heir after Renly's death. With righteousness in hand, and relying on irresistible force to take down the lords of the Stormlands, how easy and comfortable would it be to reform? Who can question anything? After all, the Lord of the Stormlands and the King will be Joffrey himself. Although the contract between Lord and vassal still has many limitations, allowing the lords to retain a large amount of independence to resist the powerful lord. But in name, Joffrey's right to interfere is still significant and vague. In addition, it is a special state of wartime, and there is also the overwhelming military force and the vast divine grace. Past traditions and systems will be vulnerable. Great destruction, great construction. The future imperial system will be implemented first in the Stormlands, and gradually popularized, until it covers the entire 7 kingdoms of Westeros, and even the wider world. To achieve this goal, Joffrey has formulated a comprehensive plan and schedule. Take the entire Stormlands within a month. Control every castle and town in the Stormlands within 2 months, and establish a new management system. Before the end of the year, the Divine Grace Corps must be implanted in all members of the Stormlands, and use this to investigate population activities, popularize the intelligence network, and eradicate rebels and bandits. Within a year, the Crownlands and the Stormlands will be turned upside down. At that time, the brand new Stormlands will become a template and benchmark for the 7 kingdoms, powerful, prosperous, stable, and harmonious, making the lords awe and submit, and making the common people of the seven kingdoms yearn for it and be willing to embrace change. By then, Joffrey's centralization and reforms will no longer be crazy fantasies that deviate from the times, nor will they be arrogant acts against fate. What he represents is the unstoppable future, the true destiny. The solid guarantee for the realization of this plan is the rich fruits of magic, knowledge, and people's hearts that Joffrey has been developing during this period. Now, there are as many as 4,000 magicians stationed in King's Landing, and various departments such as the Research Institute, Logistics Bureau, and Engineering Bureau are operating at full speed, building new fleets, developing equipment, stockpiling materials, implementing projects, and training new troops. The King's Landing that the people of King's Landing see every day when they wake up is more magnificent and glorious than yesterday, commerce is more prosperous, and food, clothing, housing, and transportation are more abundant and convenient. There are no more beggars, gangs, bandits, or vagrants in King's Landing. Children and teenagers are learning knowledge in the Divine Grace Aura or the Ministry of Education's schools, without tuition fees. If they sign a contract to serve the royal family, they can also provide 3 meals a day. People with a skill can join various departments or industries under the royal family. Once selected, not only is a salary provided, but also food and accommodation are included. Food is unlimited, and the accommodation is tall and large, like castles, enough for thousands of people to live in. If you don't have any other skills, only strength, you can also participate in the Logistics Bureau, Engineering Bureau, or the Army Department. At least you don't have to worry about food and clothing. Even if you are disabled or seriously ill, you only need to sign a contract, and the priests from the palace can completely heal you, and you don't have to worry about your future life. The adults have their own arrangements, just obey, don't think about anything. People have never seen such a King's Landing. As long as you are willing to work hard, you won't starve to death. Holy Mother is merciful. God's bless. People completely believe in the God-chosen king and are sincerely grateful for this. And such a King's Landing is far from the end. The construction of the holy city is constantly in progress, and more magical creations are emerging. The merchants and travelers who come here are all fascinated by it, and almost all are unwilling to take a step out of King's Landing, for fear of losing such a beautiful dream. The port outside the city is piled with wood. In the blink of an eye, exquisite and brand new warships are born from the scattered piles of wood and fall steadily into the water. In just a few days, a new royal fleet has almost grown out. Without a doubt, as long as the number of sailors can keep up, the warships will soon be able to fill the entire Blackwater Rush, and Renly's rebels will not even think about crossing the river, not even one. Of course, most people think that the new fleet will not work. After all, the God-chosen king personally leads the invincible fleet to sea. Having witnessed the power and magic of divine grace, most of the people in King's Landing have gotten rid of their worries and hesitations about Renly's rebellion, and have firmly supported the Iron Throne and wholeheartedly dedicated themselves. The hearts of the people in King's Landing are all with the royal family. In terms of magic, although the Holy War Army in King's Landing cannot continue to increase due to Joffrey's departure, other developments will not stop there. 10 warships are specially responsible for connecting King's Landing and the fleet, traveling back and forth every day. Joffrey was able to get the newly added rune energy from King's Landing in time, and he could also send various magical creations to King's Landing, such as wishing stones, monitors, and information modification devices. Therefore, the number of divine grace blessed in King's Landing is still growing steadily. The key equipment of each department is sufficient. In general, King's Landing is in very good condition, safe, prosperous, powerful, and firm, enough to provide various support for the changing storm lands. Here, the royal fleet will pioneer the changes in the storm lands. 300 warships, with 1,000 rune-engraved cannons, nearly 20,000 crew members, and 10,000 magical guards. This is a rich fortune and a huge force. Every day, the rune energy generated by the magicians on the fleet is enough to create thousands of wishing stones, which can supply tens of thousands of divine grace cores. After turning 20,000 crew members into Holy War Army, this number will double. Relying on this abundant rune energy, it is more than enough to provide the divine grace core consumption for millions of people in the Stormlands before the end of the year. The premise is to take and control the Stormlands. Go over, stay, and complete the conquest. Joffrey looked at the crowd below.